The security footage flickered, black and white. Timestamp 03:47 a.m., Edwards Air Force Base, Hangar 7. The corridor stretched empty under fluorescent lights, sterile and silent as a morgue. Then the image stuttered, a glitch, static crawling across the screen like insects. When the picture returned, the corridor was the same lights, same angle, same time stamp. But now a dark trail ran along the white tile floor, liquid, glistening, leading from the restricted access door to the emergency exit. The kind of trail that told stories no one wanted to hear. Another flicker. The corridor returned to its original state, clean, empty, pristine. Security Officer James Martinez leaned closer to the monitor bank, coffee forgotten in his hand. 32 years in the Air Force, 20 of them in security. He knew equipment failure when he saw it. This was not equipment failure. He rewound the footage, watched it again. Empty corridor, glitch, blood trail, glitch, empty corridor. His finger hovered over the incident report button, then stopped. Someone had cleaned a crime scene that had not happened yet, or had cleaned it so thoroughly that it existed only in the gap between digital frames. Someone who understood how security systems worked, how they failed, how they remembered. Martinez reached for his radio, then hesitated. Who do you call when the crime exists only in the space between seconds, when the evidence is an absence? He saved the footage to a secure drive, logged it as a system malfunction, and tried not to think about what kind of person could make something disappear so completely that reality itself forgot it had been there. 7 days earlier, reality was simpler, or seemed to be. The cleaning cart rolled through the corridor with a rhythmic squeak that marked the passage of hours more reliably than any clock. 02:00 a.m. The graveyard shift, when bases slept and only ghosts walked the halls. Elena Reeves pushed the cart with the steady patience of someone who had pushed 1,000 carts through 1,000 empty corridors. Middle-aged, unremarkable, the kind of woman people looked through rather than at. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency. Spray bottle, wipe, inspect, move forward 3 feet, repeat. The floor behind her reflected the lights above with mirror perfection. Not clean, perfect. There was a difference. Clean was good enough. Perfect was suspicious. But Elena Reeves had learned long ago that the best hiding place was in plain sight, doing a job so well that people stopped seeing the person doing it. She paused at a junction. 3 corridors branched from this point like veins from a heart. North led to the administrative wing, east to the hangars, south to the section marked with yellow warning stripes and biometric scanners and signs that said things like restricted access and authorized personnel only and Project Nightfall. The kind of signs that made curious people turn around. The kind that made Elena Reeves stop and look while appearing not to. Her eyes tracked the security camera mounted in the corner. Sweep pattern, left to right, 20-second intervals, blind spot at 14 seconds. She had memorized every camera in Hangar 7 during her first week. Every blind spot, every gap in coverage. Not because her job required it, because her training did. Master Sergeant training. 5th Special Forces Group training. The kind that taught you to map terrain, whether that terrain was Afghan mountains or American military corridors. The way a sniper memorizes wind patterns. The way a pilot memorizes engine sounds. The way soldiers memorize the things that keep them alive. She continued her route, cart squeaking, floor gleaming, just another cleaner, just another night. In her apartment 15 miles from base, reality was different. The studio in Lancaster was cheap, generic, furnished with the minimum required for human habitation: bed, table, chair. Kitchenette with appliances that worked but looked like they wished they did not. No photos on the walls, no plants, no evidence that anyone actually lived here rather than simply existed between shifts. Elena opened the closet. 3 uniforms hung in plastic wrap. Behind them, a false panel she had installed the first night. She pressed the corner where wood met metal. The panel swung open on hinges that made no sound because she oiled them weekly. The wall behind held a different kind of uniform. Tactical vest rated for rifle rounds. Load-bearing harness with quick-release buckles. PVS-14 night vision monocular. Encrypted communications gear with frequency hopping capability. A suppressed Glock 19 in a sapphire-rilland quick-draw holster. 3 spare magazines loaded with federal HSD hollow points. A bar knife with 7-inch blade. Items that had no place in a cleaner's life, but made perfect sense in the life she had lived before. Before Syria, before the explosion, before they declared her dead and offered her a choice that was not really a choice. She sat at the table, opened a laptop that looked consumer-grade but hummed with military specification encryption that would take NSA weeks to crack if they even noticed it existed. Initiated a secure connection through 7 proxy servers across 4 continents. The screen remained black except for a single line of text: authenticate. She typed a code that changed every 24 hours based on an algorithm only 3 people knew. Waited. The screen flickered to life, still black, but now a voice emerged from the speakers. Male. Distorted through multiple filters that made him sound like he was speaking from inside a metal drum filled with water. Her handler. The man who was not a man but a protocol, a process, a system that sent her into places where official personnel could not go. Status, not a question, a demand dressed as efficiency. Colonel Vance maintains her pattern. Wednesday nights, late hours, alone in her office, no security detail. Unusual for someone at her level. She requested no detail, directly to base security chief, in writing, memo dated 3 weeks ago. A pause. In the world of intelligence, pauses meant computation, analysis, recalibration. When handlers paused, it meant the data did not fit the model and the model needed adjustment. That is interesting. Elena waited, let him process. She had learned that silence was often more productive than questions, that handlers revealed more through what they did not say than what they did. Continue observation. Report any external contacts, any deviation from established pattern, any indication she is preparing to act rather than merely considering action. Understood. Are you maintaining cover discipline? No deviations from your assigned role. I clean floors. I am invisible. That is the point of this assignment. Good. Remember, Reeves, you do not exist. If this operation burns, you were never there. The paperwork confirming your death in Syria is ironclad. Coming back from the dead requires explanations we cannot provide. The connection terminated with a click that sounded final. Elena closed the laptop, sat in the darkness of her apartment and listened to the silence. The kind of silence that came from being erased, from being declared dead so completely that resurrection was not just unlikely but officially impossible. She had died in Syria 8 years ago, killed in action during a classified operation that went wrong in ways the official reports sanitized into acceptable casualties and mission parameters exceeded. The paperwork said so. The memorial service at Fort Bragg said so with a flag and a chaplain, and words about duty and sacrifice. The condolence letter to parents she had not seen in 20 years said so in language designed to comfort without revealing. Master Sergeant Elena Reeves, 5th Special Forces Group, gave her life in service to her country in a classified operation that could never be discussed or acknowledged or remembered, except as a line in a casualty report that itself was classified. And yet here she was, cleaning floors, watching a colonel who had stopped trusting the people supposed to protect her, waiting for something to happen that her handler would not explain, but seemed very interested in preventing or controlling or documenting, depending on which orders were real and which were misdirection. Elena looked at her nightstand, at the picture frame lying face down. She did not need to turn it over. She knew what it showed: a younger version of herself, smiling, standing in desert camouflage with a unit that no longer existed, with people who were also officially dead, with a man whose face she tried not to remember but whose voice still woke her at 3 a.m. when the walls between sleep and memory grew thin enough to breach. Daniel Hale, Sergeant Major, her commanding officer, her mentor, the man who taught her that leadership meant bringing people home even when bringing them home was not guaranteed, especially when it was not guaranteed. They told her he died 3 weeks after Syria, captured by insurgents, interrogated, executed, body never recovered, just intelligence reports that were themselves classified and a notation in a database that only a dozen people could access. She left the frame face down, walked to the window, looked out at the desert night and the distant lights of the air base where somewhere a colonel was working late and alone and afraid of something she could not name but could feel like a hand on her throat. Elena understood that fear, had lived with it in Kandahar and Fallujah, and a dozen other places where the enemy could be anyone and trust was currency you spent carefully, because once gone, it never returned at full value. She returned to the closet, took the Glock from its holster, field stripped it on the kitchen table with the automatic precision that came from doing something so many times that thought became interference, cleaned each part with the attention some people gave to prayer or meditation or whatever helped them believe the universe had order, reassembled it in 18 seconds, loaded a magazine, chambered a round, safed the weapon, placed it in a shoulder bag designed to look like cleaning supply storage. Tomorrow was Wednesday. Colonel Vance would work late. Elena would clean the floors near her office, and something would either happen or continue not happening in the way that intelligence operations often did. Long periods of watching punctuated by brief moments of action that justified the watching or revealed it had been watching the wrong thing entirely. In intelligence work, the waiting was the hardest part. The space between anticipation and event where doubt grew like mold in dark places. The hours spent preparing for a moment that might never arrive, or might arrive in a form that made all the preparation irrelevant. Colonel Sarah Vance knew about waiting. 50 years old, 28 years in uniform, a career built on precision and protocol, and doing the right thing even when the right thing was inconvenient for people who preferred convenience to correctness, especially when it was inconvenient. Her office on the 3rd floor of the Hangar 7 administrative wing reflected that career. Commendations on the wall and frames that were regulation spacing and alignment. Unit photos from deployments to places she could name and missions she could not discuss. Models of aircraft she had worked on during her years in aeronautical engineering before staff positions and administrative duties replaced slide rules and wind tunnels with meetings and memoranda. The X-47B prototype. The F-35 Joint Strike Fighter. The kind of hardware that represented billions in development costs and decades of research and the cutting edge of American air superiority. And now Project Nightfall. The file sat on her desk in a SCIF-rated container, classified above top secret, special compartmented information, TS/SCI/NOFORN. The kind of document that came in cases with armed couriers and required biometric authentication just to open. She had the clearance. She had the access. She had read every page twice, because the first reading made her think she had misunderstood, and the second reading confirmed she had understood perfectly. She wished she had not. The satellite imagery showed a platform in geosynchronous orbit, 32 meters long, Solar panels spread like wings, providing 200 kilowatts of continuous power, peaceful from a distance, beautiful even in the way that technology could be beautiful when viewed without context, until you saw the specifications, the payload capacity, the targeting systems with sub-meter accuracy. The tungsten rods, each weighing 200 pounds and designed to strike from orbit at speeds exceeding Mach 10, with kinetic energy equivalent to nuclear weapons, but none of the radiation or fallout or political complications. Kinetic bombardment, rods from God, the kind of weapon that sounded like science fiction until you read the engineering reports and realized it was science fact waiting only for deployment authorization. And it violated every treaty the United States had signed about weaponizing space since 1967. Vance looked out her window, saw the cleaning cart pass in the corridor below. The woman pushing it moved with the steady rhythm of someone who had done this job so many times that thought was no longer required. Just muscle memory and routine, and the comfort of repetition that let the mind wander while the body worked. Vance wondered what that felt like. To have a simple job with clear metrics and no moral weight. To push a cart and clean floors and go home without the burden of knowing things that could end careers or start wars or get people killed depending on who found out and what they chose to do with the knowing. She turned back to her desk, opened the locked drawer that required both key and fingerprint scanner, took out an envelope already addressed to Senator Richard Hawkins, chairman of the Senate Armed Services Committee, one of the few people in Washington she still trusted to put country before party and principle before politics. The envelope was sealed, but the letter inside was not yet written, because writing it meant making a choice that could not be unmade, whistleblower or soldier, conscience or career, honor or orders, the kind of choice that defined lives and ended them even when the ending looked like survival. The photo on her desk showed a younger version of herself, Second Lieutenant Vance, fresh from the academy, still believing that the military was pure and the mission was clear, and America always played by its own rules because the rules were what made America different from the enemies it fought. 28 years had taught her different, had taught her that the space between ideal and real was where people like her lived when they paid attention. People who followed orders until the orders became unacceptable, who served the institution until the institution betrayed its own principles. She closed the drawer, locked it. The envelope would wait. She needed more than suspicion and moral certainty, needed proof that Project Nightfall was not just theoretical contingency planning, that someone actually intended to deploy these weapons, to use them, to break the treaties and hide behind classification and dare anyone to stop them. Her computer chimed, encrypted message on the JWICS terminal that connected to classified networks. She opened it with her CAC card and PIN, read the single line that appeared, felt her stomach drop like an elevator with cut cables. Nightfall deployment authorized. Launch window, 72 hours. Presidential finding attached. Execute per OPLAN 8848. They were really going to do it. Launch the platform. Arm the weapons. Make the United States the first nation to weaponize orbital space since the Outer Space Treaty of 1967. And they were going to do it in secret, without congressional notification, without public debate, without anyone who might object having the chance to object before the fait accompli made objection irrelevant. Vance reached for the envelope, started writing the letter, fast, before courage could cool into caution, before duty to the chain of command could override duty to the Constitution, before the part of her brain that specialized in risk assessment could enumerate all the ways this would destroy everything she had built over 28 years. She did not hear the door downstairs fail to lock behind the cleaning cart, Did not hear the camera in the corridor loop its own footage in a 2-minute cycle that would hide movement if you knew the timing. Did not see the fresh boot prints in the hallway she had walked minutes before. Size 12. Tactical tread pattern. Salaman Quest 4 DGTX. The kind special operations soldiers wore. The kind cleaners did not. 5 floors below, Elena Reeves saw all of it. She stood in the maintenance tunnel that ran beneath Hangar 7 like a concrete nervous system, built during the Cold War when people believed nuclear weapons made underground survival spaces necessary. The walls were thick reinforced concrete designed to withstand overpressure and thermal pulse. The lighting was dim emergency bulbs that cast everything in amber. The air smelled of machine oil and dust and abandonment. Elena held a tablet that was not on any equipment inventory. Screens showing 12 camera feeds she had accessed using credentials that officially did not exist. Credentials she had obtained during her first week by watching the security technician type his password and memorizing it because passwords that were 8 characters with 1 capital and 1 number were not passwords. They were suggestions. She watched the corridor outside Vance's office, watched the emergency exit door that should have been locked, should have triggered an alarm at the security desk, should have done anything except hang half open like an invitation. She zoomed the camera feed, enhanced the image using software that was definitely not part of the tablet's advertised capabilities. The boot prints were fresh, wet, not from rain because Edwards was high desert and it had not rained in 3 weeks, from condensation, the kind that formed when someone moved from air-conditioned interior to hot exterior and back again fast enough that their boots never dried. Someone had come in from outside the building, through a door that should have been locked, within the last 10 minutes based on the water evaporation rate, and they had disabled the door alarm using techniques that took training Elena recognized because she had that training. She keyed her radio, security frequency. Security desk, this is Sanitation 7. Possible breach at Sector C, emergency exit 7 Charlie. Door is unsecured. I have visual confirmation. Static, then a bored voice. Young male, 25 at most. Probably his first assignment after technical school. The kind they gave to people who had scored high on tests but not high enough for anything important. Copy Sanitation 7. Stand by for confirmation. More static. Elena waited, watched the feeds. The boot prints led toward the server room, toward the classified computer terminals, toward the place where someone could access things they should not access if they had the skills and the time and the willingness to commit federal crimes. Sanitation 7, Security Desk. We are not showing any breach alerts on our board. Door shows secured. Probably a sensor malfunction. Log it in your daily report and continue your assigned rounds. Negative security. I have physical visual confirmation. Door is open. Boot prints on floor indicate recent passage. Size 12 tactical boots. This is not maintenance. A pause. Longer than it should have been. When someone on a secure military base reported a physical security breach, and the response was hesitation, that was not protocol. That was something else. Something that made Elena's training scream warnings that overrode the part of her brain that wanted to believe in systems and oversight and the basic functionality of security on American military installations. Ma'am, I need you to stay clear of that area. Maintenance is working tonight on HVAC systems. They probably propped the door for equipment access. Just log the incident and continue your assigned route. Security will check it during next patrol cycle. Maintenance did not work at 03:00 a.m. unless there was an emergency, and emergencies generated paperwork and radio traffic. Equipment access required permits and escorts and sign-in logs, and security did not tell witnesses to stay away from breaches. They investigated immediately because that was the entire point of having security. Elena felt the old training surface, the protocols that no amount of floor cleaning could erase, the instincts that had kept her alive in places where hesitation measured in seconds could be measured later in body bags. When the official response did not make tactical sense, assume the official response was compromised. She killed the radio, pulled out her personal phone, the encrypted one that was not in her real name and not traceable to any identity that had a social security number or credit history. Sent a text message to her handler using the emergency code that meant situation is not routine and requires immediate guidance. 3 words: breach detected, security compromised. The response came in 14 seconds, 2 words that made everything clear and nothing better. Maintain cover. She typed faster. Request permission to investigate. Negative, do not engage. Maintain cover, await instruction. Elena stared at the screen, at the order that made no tactical sense unless the tactical sense was that her handler knew about the breach, expected the breach, wanted the breach to proceed uninterrupted while Elena stayed in her lane and cleaned her floors and asked no questions about why a security breach was being protected by the people supposed to prevent security breaches. She looked back at the camera feeds, at Colonel Vance in her office writing something that looked urgent, at boot prints leading toward classified computer systems, at a situation that was either authorized black operations or unauthorized infiltration, and the difference mattered except when it did not, because either way someone was about to do something that Vance would not survive if she stayed in that office. Elena made a decision that people in her profession were not supposed to make unless they wanted to become former people in her profession. She deleted the handler's message, turned off the phone, removed the battery, and did what every instinct screamed was correct even when orders said otherwise. She investigated. The tunnel system beneath Hangar 7 was extensive. 3 miles of passages connecting every building in the complex through a maze that took time to learn and confidence to navigate in the dark. Elena had spent her first month memorizing it, walking every passage, measuring every distance, noting every access point and vertical shaft in place where tunnels branched or intersected or dead ended. She had done this because good operatives studied their environment the way chess masters studied boards, not just the current position but all possible future positions, all the moves and countermoves and sacrifices that might become necessary when the situation changed from planning to execution. The situation had changed. She moved through the darkness with the night vision monocular down over her left eye. The world turned green and geometric, empty except for pipes and conduits, and the occasional rat that scattered at her approach with squeaks that echoed in ways that made them sound like voices if you were tired enough or scared enough or had been underground too long. She carried the suppressed Glock in a 2-handed grip, weapon at low ready, safety off, finger indexed along the frame above the trigger guard. The way you carried a weapon when you expected to use it but hoped you would not have to because using it meant the situation had deteriorated beyond salvage. The boot prints continued in the dust, leading deeper into the complex, toward the server room's sublevel access, toward the place where classified networks terminated in physical hardware that no amount of remote hacking could penetrate without physical access, because air gaps were still real security when implemented correctly. You wanted those files, you came in person. You brought tools and time and expertise. You brought a team because solo operations had too many points of failure. You brought discipline because one mistake would trigger alarms that would bring security, and security would bring investigators, and investigators would find things that could not be explained away. She heard them before she saw them, voices, low and professional, coming from the server room access tunnel ahead. She pressed against the wall, controlled her breathing the way they taught at selection, slow and deep and silent, listened. Overwatch, this is demo. Charges set on primary support columns. Bravo, Charlie, Delta positions confirmed. Timer armed for 600 detonation. A pause while someone listened to radio response Elena could not hear. Copy Overwatch. Tech is inside the server room now. Estimate 15 minutes for data extraction using the hardware backdoors. Another pause. Elena heard something in the voice, not nervousness. Professionals did not get nervous, but calculation. The sound of someone doing math about human cost. Shift change is at 600. Building occupancy will be approximately 43 personnel at detonation, mostly administrative and janitorial. Acceptable loss per mission parameters. Elena felt ice form in her chest. Not data theft, not espionage, murder. They were going to blow the building with people inside. Make it look like structural failure or gas leak or any of the dozen ways you could kill people, and call it accident if you had the resources and ruthlessness and belief that some deaths were acceptable when weighed against mission objectives that were never quite specified but always classified. She raised her weapon, acquired sight picture on the figure 20 meters ahead. Center mass. Easy shot at this range even with suppressed subsonic ammunition. She could drop him before he knew she was there. Move to the next target. Clear the immediate threat and then deal with whoever was in that server room before they finished whatever they were finishing. Her finger took up slack on the trigger. 2 pounds of pressure. Then 3. The Glock was 3.5-pound trigger pull and she was at 3 pounds and rising. Then the figure moved. Just a small adjustment of stance. Weight shifting from left foot to right. Head canting slightly when listening to radio traffic that he was receiving through an earpiece she could not see but could infer from the head angle, and the way his lips moved in response to words only he could hear. And Elena recognized the movement, not the person, the pattern, the physical vocabulary that was as unique as fingerprints if you knew the language. The way he shifted weight spoke of training she recognized because she had received the same training from the same cadre at the same courses that were not on any public schedule. She lowered the weapon, not much, just enough that the shot would miss if she had to take it, whispered into the darkness, words from a different life, a code phrase from a training evolution that officially never existed. The kind of challenge that identified friendly operators in hostile territory when radios were compromised and uniforms were unreliable, and the only authentication that mattered was knowledge that could not be faked. Night falls. The figure froze, turned, slow and controlled, weapon rising, professional, but there was something else beneath the professionalism. Recognition, confusion. The hesitation of someone hearing a voice from a past they thought was buried and sealed and could not surface except it just had. Silence stretched. 3 seconds that felt like minutes when you were standing in a tunnel with a weapon pointed at you and trying to decide if the person pointing it was friend or enemy or something more complicated that fit neither category. Then the figure spoke. Voice low and male and rough with years and damage and something else, something broken. And ghosts rise. The correct response, the proper authentication. This person was friendly, or had been, or carried the codes that said they should be even when their presence suggested otherwise. Elena felt reality tilt. Friendly forces did not plant demolition charges in American military bases at 3 a.m., did not talk about acceptable casualties among their own people, did not operate in shadows while plotting to kill 43 personnel who had committed no crime except being in the wrong building at the wrong time. Unless the definition of friendly had changed. unless the mission had evolved in ways that made old categories obsolete, unless everything she thought she understood about who gave orders and who followed them, and who decided what was acceptable had become something else entirely. She backed away, slow, weapon still ready but not aimed. The figure watched but did not pursue, did not call for backup, did not do anything except stand there in the tunnel like a ghost looking at another ghost and wondering which one was real and which was reflection. Elena reached the junction point, turned, moved fast through the tunnels back to the maintenance access point she had entered from. Her mind processed data with the speed that came from training and necessity. Friendly operative using correct codes. Demolition charges set for mass casualty event. Time to coincide with shift change for maximum body count. Colonel Vance in her office with classified documents about Project Nightfall. Her handler telling her to stand down and not interfere. The pattern was not random. The pattern was coordination. Multiple elements working toward a single objective, taking out Vance, destroying evidence, making it look like structural failure, and using people who should have been on the same side to do it because using enemies would raise questions while using friends just raised the body count. She emerged from the tunnel into the janitor closet on the ground floor, stripped off the tactical gear, shoved it into her supply bag, smoothed down her uniform, checked her reflection in the small mirror mounted inside the closet door. Just a cleaner, just a woman with a mop. Nothing to see here. Move along. She pulled out her phone, turned it back on, typed a message to her handler. No encryption this time, just plain text that would be logged and archived and impossible to deny. Active breach in progress. Demolition charges placed. Colonel Vance is primary target. Operators are friendly forces using valid authentication codes. Time sensitive. Request immediate authorization to extract asset and prevent casualties. She hit send, waited. The response came in 20 seconds, fast enough to mean he had been expecting this message, slow enough to mean he had thought about how to respond. Maintain cover. Do not engage. This is a direct order. Await further instruction. She typed back, each word deliberate. They are going to kill Vance and 43 others in less than 4 hours. I request authorization to prevent this. Negative. Your orders are clear. Maintain cover. Any deviation will result in termination of contract and potential prosecution. Elena stared at the screen, at the order that made everything clear in the worst possible way. Her handler did not want to stop this. Her handler wanted it to happen, wanted Vance dead, wanted the evidence destroyed, wanted everything to look like structural failure so nobody would ask questions that led to answers about orbital weapons and treaty violations, and the people who authorized deployment against the objections of people with inconvenient consciences. She was not here to protect Vance. She was here to make sure nobody else protected her either, was here to be another set of eyes that watched and reported and did nothing while murder dressed itself in mission parameters and acceptable losses. Elena destroyed the phone, not gently, smashed it against the concrete floor until it was fragments and circuit boards and memory chips too damaged to reconstruct. Then she swept the pieces into the trash bag, tied it closed, set it with the other trash, and became someone different. Not Elena Reeves the cleaner who followed orders and stayed invisible, and did what her handler said because handlers had information she did not, and that information justified the orders. Not Master Sergeant Reeves the soldier who executed missions, because missions came from command, and command had legal authority, and legal authority was what separated professional military from armed mobs. Something in between, something that existed in the gap between orders and conscience, between what was legal and what was right, between following the system and following the conviction that some actions were wrong regardless of who authorized them. A rogue operative. The most dangerous kind. The kind that knew too much and cared too little about consequences, because the consequences of doing nothing were worse than the consequences of doing something unauthorized. She had 4 hours until detonation. 43 people who did not know they were already dead unless someone changed the equation. One colonel who had chosen truth over career and was about to pay the ultimate price for that choice. And a handler who had just learned that some weapons break their chains regardless of threats. Elena pushed her cart toward the administrative wing, toward the 3rd floor where Vance's office glowed with light from someone working too late on something too important, toward a confrontation that would either save lives or end hers, or most likely both, because saving lives in this business usually involved putting yours on the table as ante. The cart squeaked, the floors gleamed, and somewhere in the tunnels below, friendly forces prepared to commit mass murder in the name of missions they did not question, because soldiers were not supposed to question orders even when the orders were unconscionable. But Elena Reeves was not a soldier anymore, had not been since Syria, since the explosion that killed her officially while leaving her alive unofficially. Since the choice between staying dead and working as a ghost or coming back to life and facing questions about survival that had no good answers. She was a ghost, and ghosts had their own rules, their own codes, their own understanding of what mattered when everything else was stripped away and only the essential remained. What mattered was preventing murder, everything else was details. She reached the 3rd floor. The corridor was empty. Late-night skeleton crew. Most offices dark. Security at minimum staffing because budget cuts and risk assessments said that internal threats on secure military bases were minimal, and resources should focus on perimeter defense, not internal monitoring. The risk assessments were wrong. They usually were. Elena positioned her cart near Vance's office door, pretended to clean, actually scanning, camera coverage, sight lines, escape routes, the tactical assessment that became automatic when you had done it enough times in enough places where getting it wrong meant dying or worse, watching other people die because your assessment was inadequate. Vance's light was still on, shadow visible through the frosted glass door panel, still writing, still alone, still unaware that beneath her feet explosive charges were armed and counting down toward a dawn she would not see unless someone warned her, and warning her meant revealing things that were supposed to stay hidden. Elena made her choice, not between good options, between bad options and worse options, between saving one person and staying silent about larger crimes, between being the weapon her handler wanted and being the human she remembered being before weapons became her purpose. She opened the door without knocking. Vance looked up, startled, hand moving instinctively toward the desk drawer where her sidearm lived because colonels on classified installations who worked alone at night had reason to be armed and jumpy. "Do not," Elena said, kept her voice low, calm, the voice of someone giving orders in crisis because orders in crisis required calmness or they became panic and panic killed people faster than bullets. "I am not your enemy." "Who are you?" Vance's hand stayed on the drawer, ready but not committed. "Someone trying to keep you alive. There is a team coming to kill you. 5 operators, special forces trained. They have planted demolition charges on primary support columns. Detonation at 600. You have less than 4 hours and counting." "How do you know this?" "Because I heard them set the charges. Because I am not actually a cleaning woman. Because I was sent here to watch you, and I just decided watching is insufficient when what you need is active intervention." Vance studied her. Career officer evaluating intelligence from an unexpected source. trying to decide if this was legitimate threat warning or elaborate deception or mental breakdown of a woman who cleaned floors and imagined conspiracies. The cleaner is actually an intelligence operative with knowledge of classified black operations. Master Sergeant Elena Reeves, 5th Special Forces Group, officially killed in action 8 years ago in Syria, unofficially recruited by Defense Intelligence Agency to work as ghost operative with no official cover or protection. Sent here to monitor you. Just got orders to stand down while you die along with everyone else in this building at shift change. That is insane. That is classified operations. Insane is the baseline, gets worse from there. Vance made a decision. Elena saw it happen in her eyes. The shift from skepticism to belief, from bureaucrat to soldier, from someone who hoped this was crazy to someone who knew it was real and had to act accordingly. What do you need me to do? Come with me. Now. Bring nothing except yourself and whatever digital copies of Nightfall files you can carry. We have very little time and less room for error. Vance grabbed her laptop, shoved it in a case, took her sidearm from the drawer, stood, moved toward the door. Where are we going? Somewhere they cannot get to without equipment they do not have and time they do not have. Old Cold War bunker, sub-basement 3. Sealed blast doors, independent life support. They would need cutting torches and 30 minutes of noise to breach. They have plastic explosives and desire to remain unnoticed. Math favors us. I did not know we had a Cold War bunker. It got decommissioned in 1987, removed from official blueprints during the last facility modernization. Still exists, still functional. Just forgotten because institutions forget when forgetting is convenient. She pulled a chair over, climbed up, pushed aside a ceiling panel, revealed ductwork and crawl space and the kind of void that buildings hid inside themselves like secrets. You first, I will guide from behind. Vance looked at the opening, at the darkness, at the choice between staying in the light and dying or crawling into shadows and possibly surviving. She climbed. Elena followed, replaced the panel, and in the darkness above the 3rd floor of Hangar 7, 2 women who should never have met began a journey through spaces that officially did not exist toward a shelter that no longer appeared on maps while below them charges counted down, and operators moved with purpose and systems failed in all the ways that mattered most. The bunker lights flickered once before stabilizing at emergency power levels. Dim, but sufficient. The generators that had sat dormant for 40 years coughed to life with sounds that suggested mechanical resurrection was possible but not guaranteed. The hum filled the concrete chamber with white noise that was almost peaceful if you did not think about why you were hearing it or what would happen when it stopped. Elena checked her weapon for the 3rd time in as many minutes. Magazine seated, round chambered, safety off but finger indexed along the frame because negligent discharges killed more operators than enemy fire when tension made muscles twitch. The Glock felt heavier than it should. Or maybe that was just the weight of decisions accumulating like compound interest on a loan you never agreed to but somehow owed anyway. Vance worked at her laptop, trying different network configurations, trying to find some ghost signal that might penetrate 3 levels of Cold War concrete designed to survive electromagnetic pulse and 50 years of institutional forgetting. Her fingers moved fast across the keyboard. The kind of fast that came from desperation dressed as productivity. Anything. Nothing. We are in a Faraday cage wrapped in a fallout shelter, wrapped in a building designed to keep secrets. Even if I had signal, the encryption handshake would take hours to negotiate with satellites that are not programmed to look for devices that should not exist in locations that are not on their coverage maps. Then we do this the old way. Which is We wait for them to make a mistake. Everyone makes mistakes. Professionals just make smaller ones that take longer to exploit. Vance stopped typing, looked at Elena, really looked, not at the cleaning uniform or the middle-aged face or the gray at the temples, at the posture, the way Elena stood with weight balanced on balls of feet and corners already checked and exit routes mapped in her mind like a GPS system that never shut off. Master Sergeant, 5th Special Forces Group, you said that upstairs, is it true? Was true. I died 8 years ago in Syria. Officially. The paperwork is very convincing. Has my signature forged on documents I never saw attesting to a will I never wrote leaving everything to parents I have not spoken to in 20 years. But you are here. Ghosts have that problem. We keep existing even after death certificates say otherwise. Makes filing taxes complicated. Why fake your death? Why spend 8 years cleaning floors? Elena moved to the bunker door, put her ear against the cold steel, listened for sounds that were not supposed to be there. Footsteps, voices, the whisper of tactical gear moving through empty spaces with purpose that was patient but not indefinite. Because 8 years ago I was part of an operation that went wrong, or went exactly right depending on whose version you believe. My entire team walked into an ambush. Vehicle-borne IED followed by coordinated small arms fire from elevated positions. We were supposed to secure a compound outside Raqqa. Intelligence said it was empty except for one high-value target. Intelligence was wrong. Or intelligence was right and someone wanted us in that building when the charges detonated. You think it was deliberate. I know it was deliberate, because the man who briefed us on that mission is the same man who just ordered your death tonight. General Marcus Webb, Deputy Director of the Central Intelligence Agency. The man who decides what is necessary and who pays the cost for necessity when necessity requires blood. Vance absorbed this, connected threads, saw patterns that had been there all along if you knew the topology of power and corruption and the places where they intersected. Nightfall, he is protecting Nightfall. Among other things, Webb has been running black operations for 20 years. Syria was just one operation in a portfolio that would horrify anyone who still believes American foreign policy has moral foundations. You became another line item when you decided to grow a conscience about orbital weapons platforms that violate every treaty we signed. And you, what did you become? Elena did not answer immediately, because the answer was complicated, because she had become a tool that broke itself, a weapon that turned on its handler, a ghost that refused to stay buried in ways that made bureaucrats nervous because bureaucracy relied on people staying in assigned categories. I became someone who cleans floors and watches people and waits for orders. Tonight I got orders that went too far. Tomorrow I will probably pay for refusing them. But tonight 43 people stay alive because I chose conscience over compliance. That seems like acceptable trade. Above them, 3 levels up, Hale stood in Vance's empty office and tried to remember things his mind said did not exist. The code phrase kept echoing. Night falls, and his automatic response, and ghosts rise, words that came from training he could not recall with people whose faces were blank spaces in memory that should have been filled. He looked at the ceiling access panel, at the chair positioned underneath, at the dust pattern on the tile floor that showed 2 people climbing up and one set of footprints distinctly smaller than military standard for male operators. Female, size 7 based on spacing. Special forces trained based on the route selection and blind spot awareness. She knew his tactics, knew them well enough to predict and counter. Knew them because she had learned them from the same instructors or the same operating manual or the same person who had trained him before training got replaced by conditioning that made memory unreliable. "Boss," Bishop's voice pulled him back from thoughts that went in circles. Chen tracked building schematics. Old Cold War plans show bunker system. Sub-basement 3. Sealed during Reagan administration but structure integrity remains. Steel blast doors. Independent power and ventilation. Can we breach it? With current equipment loadout? Negative. Would need cutting torches, thermite charges, time we do not have and noise we cannot afford. Every guard on base would converge before we got through 12 inches of hardened steel. Hale nodded. Process the tactical problem. When you cannot go through the door, you change the door. When you cannot change the door, you change what the door protects. When you cannot change what the door protects, you change why they are protecting it by making inside more dangerous than outside. We do not breach, we make them come out voluntarily. How? Environmental controls. Chen, can you access building HVAC management systems? Give me 10 minutes and legitimate credentials. You have 5 minutes and whatever credentials you can improvise. I want oxygen levels in that bunker dropping. Not lethally, just uncomfortably. Enough to make them wonder if 40-year-old life support systems work as advertised or fail in ways that kill slowly. Chen hesitated. The pause that came when orders conflicted with training about acceptable methods and collateral damage parameters. Boss, that is not standard protocol for securing non-combatants. Protocol assumes non-combatants cooperate with security forces attempting to protect them. These non-combatants are actively evading. New situation requires new protocols. Make it happen. The silence on the radio lasted 3 seconds. Then Chen's voice came back, quieter, changed in ways that suggested compliance without enthusiasm. Understood, HVAC access in progress. Hale heard the change, heard the sound of a good man doing questionable things because orders were orders and loyalty was currency. And sometimes the two conflicted, but you chose loyalty, because loyalty kept you alive when orders got you killed or prosecuted, depending on which came first. He had heard that sound before, in voices he could not remember from operations he could not fully recall. Men making choices they would regret later because later was better than never and never was what you got when you disobeyed in situations where disobedience meant abandonment. In the bunker, Elena felt the change first. The air thickening, subtle, like atmospheric pressure before a storm when barometric readings dropped and birds stopped singing because they knew what was coming even if humans needed instruments to confirm it. She checked the air vents, listened to the flow rate, heard the decrease that should not be there based on the generator output and fan specifications she had memorized from the technical manual she had found during her first week of exploring the bunker systems. They are cutting our air supply. Vance looked up from the laptop. Can they do that? They can do anything if they are willing to take the time and accept the risk of being noticed. Question is how much time we have before we must choose between suffocating slowly in here or opening that door and dying fast out there. How long do we have? In a space this size, with 2 people and minimal physical activity, maybe 3 hours, maybe less if these scrubbers are operating at degraded capacity after 40 years of neglect. 3 hours, same as the detonation timer. Not coincidence. They are forcing a decision point. Die in here from hypoxia or die out there from bullets. Either way we die and they complete mission parameters without official complications. Vance saved her files, closed the laptop, stood and walked the perimeter of the bunker, looking at walls that had been designed to protect against overpressure and thermal radiation and fallout that would poison continents. walls that now trapped them as efficiently as they had once promised salvation. There has to be another way out. These shelters always had redundancy, emergency exits, alternate egress routes. Which would be the first thing a trained operator would secure once they knew we were here? They have 5 people. We have 2 potential exits. Math does not favor us. Then we change the math. Elena looked at Vance, saw something shift. The scared bureaucrat was gone. What remained was an officer who had made a choice and would see it through even when the cost was everything she had built over 28 years. You have a plan. You said they are professionals, that they follow training, that they are predictable because of training. Yes. Then we stop being predictable. We stop defending. We initiate contact on our terms at timing of our choosing. We attack. Elena felt something like respect, like recognition. The kind you felt when you met someone who understood that sometimes the only way out was through, and through required violence that made you uncomfortable but kept you alive. Attack 5 Special Forces operators with 1 handgun, and 1 officer who has not seen active combat since Iraq deployment in 2004. You have better suggestion. Elena ran scenarios, calculated odds, enumerated resources and deficiencies, and the probability of success measured against probability of death. All numbers were bad. Some were slightly less catastrophically bad than others. Maybe, but it requires you doing exactly what I say without question or hesitation regardless of how insane it sounds. Can you do that? I already climbed into a ceiling and crawled through a bunker because a cleaner told me to. I think I can manage additional insanity. This will be significantly worse than crawling. How much worse? You will definitely have to shoot people, possibly several people, possibly people who are just following orders they believe are legitimate. Vance touched the Beretta M9 on her hip, standard issue, 15-round magazine. She had qualified expert with it every year for 28 years, had never fired it outside controlled range conditions, had never pointed it at anything that could point back. If it prevents nightfall from deploying and prevents 43 people from dying, I will shoot whoever needs shooting and deal with consequences after. Elena almost smiled. Almost. But smiles were for after, when you survived. When the people trying to kill you were dead or captured or convinced that killing you cost more than letting you live. Then here is what we do. She explained. Vance listened. The plan was simple the way suicide missions were simple, straightforward, direct, likely to fail but marginally less likely than doing nothing which was guaranteed to fail. That is insane. Yes. We will probably die. Probability is high, but dying while fighting is better than dying while hiding. And if we do this correctly, Webb loses everything regardless of whether we survive. Then I am comfortable with the risk profile. Vance checked her weapon, chambered a round, flicked the safety, looked at Elena with the expression of someone who had just burned their boats and was curious whether drowning or the enemy killed them first. Let us make our deaths expensive for them. They moved to the bunker door. Elena positioned Vance behind a support column with good sight lines down the corridor and acceptable cover from anything smaller than rifle rounds. Gave her simple instructions. Wait for my signal. When they come through, aim center mass. Fire until slide locks back empty. Do not stop to assess. Do not hesitate. Do not try to wound. This was not the range. This was survival, and survival required you to hurt people before they hurt you. Elena took position at the door control wheel, put her hand on the cold metal, counted to 3 in her mind. Visualization of the next 60 seconds. What would happen? What could happen? What to do when what could happen replaced what should happen. She opened the door. The corridor beyond was empty, dark except for emergency lighting that cast everything in red, like the inside of a submarine running silent or a darkroom where photographs developed, and you saw what you captured or failed to capture or should never have captured at all. Elena stepped out, weapon ready, moving smooth. The tactical movement that was as natural as breathing when you had done it enough times that conscious thought became interference rather than guidance. Nothing. She advanced 10 feet, 15, checked corners at angles that minimized exposure, checked angles because walls were not cover, they were concealment, and concealment stopped bullets only in movies. Everything empty. Everything quiet except the hum of ventilation and the distant groan of a building settling into foundations that had supported it for 60 years. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that made you nervous because humans made noise even when trying to be silent, and absence of noise meant either absence of humans or presence of humans who were very good at being silent. She turned back toward the bunker entrance, saw Vance watching from the doorway, saw the question forming, saw the moment before understanding arrived. The muzzle flash came from above, from a vent opening in the ceiling where someone had climbed into ductwork and waited with the patience of a hunter who understands that prey must eventually move, and movement creates opportunity. The round hit concrete 3 inches from Elena's head, chips and dust stinging her face. She dove left, rolled, came up firing. 3 rounds into the vent opening. Heard metal clang and ricochet sounds, but no body falling or voice crying out, which meant either miss or hit to armor. Vance fired from the bunker door. Wild, untrained. But volume of fire mattered when precision was absent. 15 rounds emptying fast in 3 seconds of continuous trigger press, covering Elena's movement back to the bunker through suppressive fire that was more psychological than lethal, but psychology mattered when someone was shooting at you. They made it inside, sealed the door, spun the lock wheel, heard the solid chunk of locking dogs engaging, then heard the impacts as return fire hit steel that was built to withstand nuclear blast pressure, and barely noticed 5.56 millimeter rifle rounds. Elena checked herself for damage. No blood, no holes, lucky or skilled or both, probably both. Vance was breathing hard, magazine empty, hands shaking with adrenaline and fear and the strange exhilaration of being shot at and surviving when surviving was not guaranteed. Did I hit anyone? Unknown, but you provided effective covering fire. That is the right answer when precision is not achievable. They were waiting. You said they would secure exits, but they were waiting in ambush positions. How did they know we would open the door? Because they think like I think. Because whoever trained them trained me or trained the people who trained me. Because at our level, everyone learns from the same playbook, and the only advantage is who adapts faster to deviations from script. Vance reloaded, fingers fumbling initially, taking twice as long as it should. Elena took the magazine, seated it properly with sharp upward strike, racked the slide to chamber the first round, handed the weapon back. You did well. First time under fire is always hardest, gets easier with repetition. That was not my first time. Elena looked at her, saw something she had missed in earlier assessment. The way Vance moved had changed, was changing, like muscle memory waking from long sleep when circumstances required it. Where were you deployed? Iraq, 2004. Forward Operating Base near Fallujah. I was First Lieutenant Vance, Engineering Corps. We were supposed to assess bridge damage for reconstruction. Assessment became defense when insurgents decided bridges were worth contesting with organized force. 3 weeks of sustained contact before relief arrived from 3rd Infantry Division. You never mentioned combat experience. Because it does not fit the narrative people want. They see the desk officer, the bureaucrat, the colonel who has never done anything except push papers and attend meetings. They do not see the lieutenant who held a perimeter with a rifle and a radio and not much else besides determination. Elena reassessed. Career officer with combat experience. That changed probability calculations. Changed odds from catastrophic to merely terrible. Still bad odds, but less apocalyptically bad. Then you know what we are facing. I know they are professionals. I know we are outgunned and outnumbered. I know the only reason we are still alive is because that door is thicker than their ammunition can penetrate. And eventually they will find a way through it, or wait until air runs out, or detonate the charges and bury us under rubble. The door buys time. Time buys nothing unless we use it productively. What do you suggest? Vance looked at the ancient radio equipment, at vacuum tubes and analog dials and technology that predated transistors. The kind of technology that still worked when everything modern failed, because it was too simple to break and too robust to kill, even with neglect. Can we broadcast on this equipment? Broadcast what? The truth, the files, everything about Nightfall. If we cannot upload digitally, we broadcast analog, AM frequency, long wave, the kind that bounces off ionosphere and reaches hundreds of miles. Every radio in the region picks it up, every base, every civilian frequency scanner. We flood the airwaves with information they cannot stop because it is already propagating at light speed. Elena looked at the equipment, at the massive transmitter that had been designed to broadcast government continuity orders after nuclear exchange, at the power requirements that would drain their emergency generator in minutes, at the antenna array that was probably corroded beyond function after 40 years of exposure. That is actually not completely insane. High praise from someone who just got shot at. Can you make it work? Give me 20 minutes and access to the technical manual, and I will tell you whether it is possible or merely theoretical. Vance went to work, stripping access panels, checking circuits with multimeter she found in the equipment locker, doing the kind of field engineering that officers learned when enlisted technicians were not available and equipment needed to function regardless of condition or manual specifications. Elena watched the door, listened for sounds of cutting torch or thermite or the whisper of shaped charges being placed for breaching operations. Nothing yet, but soon, because Hale would not wait indefinitely, would not give them time to adapt and improvise, would press, would probe, would find the weakness that every defense had if you looked hard enough and were willing to pay the cost of looking with blood. Outside the bunker, Hale conducted tactical meeting. His team gathered in the corridor, faces tired, faces questioning, the kind of faces that appeared when operations went sideways and nobody knew quite how sideways or what sideways implied for future employment and freedom. Status reports. Kessler spoke first. Overwatch position compromised. They know we are in the ducts. Cannot maintain observation without unacceptable exposure to return fire. Bishop next. Breaching charges on bunker door would work, but structural collapse would trap us with them. Exit routes would be blocked, not survivable for anyone. Chen, air reduction is working but slow. Current rate suggests 3 hours until uncomfortable, 4 until dangerous. We have less than 2 hours before detonation timer reaches 0. Ramirez. Medical supplies are adequate but irrelevant if we cannot complete mission before building comes down on our heads. Hale process data. 5 professionals, One bunker, 2 targets, less than 2 hours. Math that kept getting worse regardless of how you calculated it. We need them out of that bunker. They know that. Bishop's voice carried the weight of experience. They will stay until air runs critically low or building collapses. Either option results in their death, but we do not recover the files before detonation. Then we give them something they want more than air or survival. What could they possibly want that much? Hale thought about the operator who spoke the code phrase, about movement patterns that felt familiar in ways that bypassed conscious memory, about tactical choices that mirrored his own decision-making, about someone who knew how he would act because they had learned from the same source or the same person. They want truth. They want exposure. They want the thing Webb does not want them to have, which is public knowledge of Nightfall and everyone involved. How does that help us? We offer deal. We let them broadcast whatever they need to broadcast. We let Vance upload her files to whatever destination she chooses. We stand down from aggressive action. In exchange, they give us the physical drives, the documents, the original evidence that proves Webb ordered this operation tonight. Kessler stared. Years of following orders creating cognitive dissonance with orders that contradicted previous orders. Boss, that is opposite of our mission. We are supposed to eliminate Vance and destroy evidence, not facilitate its distribution. The mission is survive the next 2 hours with something to show Webb that proves we attempted mission completion. Everything else is academic. Webb will kill us for mission failure. Webb will try to kill us regardless. Whether he succeeds depends on leverage we can acquire. If we bring him Vance's files before they go public, we become assets worth keeping alive. If files are already public but we have physical evidence proving we attempted completion, we become witnesses to illegal operations rather than failed operators. Bishop spoke carefully, testing ice. And if Vance already broadcasted, if files are already in motion, then we have different conversation with Webb. One where he understands we have proof of his illegal orders. That eliminating us means that proof goes to Senate Intelligence Committee. Mutually assured destruction. The Cold War never ended. It just changed who held the deterrent. The team absorbed this, saw the logic, saw the betrayal of everything they had been told about mission parameters and acceptable actions, saw the choice between following orders that would kill them and breaking orders that might save them while destroying everything else. Chen spoke first. I am in. Webb left us here to die in building collapse or face prosecution for unauthorized actions. I would rather live as traitor than die as loyal fool. Ramirez nodded. Agreed. Self-preservation outweighs abstract loyalty to handler who views us as expendable. Bishop took longer, loyalty warring with survival instinct, finally spoke. Acceptable, but I want witness protection afterward, full identity change, relocation assistance, that is my price. Kessler was last, oldest, most experienced, most invested in the idea that orders mattered and chains of command held, and soldiers who broke faith became something less than soldiers regardless of justification. If we do this, we can never go back, never serve again under official capacity, never be anything except mercenaries and criminals and men without countries or honor. We are already that, Tommy. We just have not admitted it yet to ourselves. Kessler looked at his team, at men he had fought beside for years across multiple continents and dozens of operations that would never appear in any official history. Men he trusted more than institution or ideology. Men who were choosing survival over honor because honor was luxury they could no longer afford. One condition: we do not harm them unnecessarily. The woman and Vance. We do not become executioners of non-combatants. We secure files. We negotiate terms. Everyone walks away breathing. That is non-negotiable. Agreed completely. We are operators, not murderers. There is still a line even if that line has moved considerably tonight. Hale moved to the bunker door. Knocked. 3 slow, 2 fast, 1 slow. The pattern they taught in advanced tactical communications course. Request for parley under white flag protocols that were unofficial but universally understood among professionals. Inside, Elena heard the knock, recognized the pattern, felt something cold settle in her chest because that pattern meant someone outside knew the codes, knew the protocols, knew her training because they had the same training from the same source. She approached the door, did not open it, spoke loud enough for her voice to carry through 12 inches of hardened steel. "I am listening." The voice that answered was male, rough with years and damage, familiar in ways that made her hands shake even though her hands never shook because shaking hands missed shots and missing shots got people killed. "We want to negotiate terms." "Negotiate what? Your mission parameters are clear. Eliminate Vance, destroy evidence, leave no witnesses. Those parameters do not include negotiation." Plans change when tactical situation evolves beyond original parameters. We want the files. You want to survive. Perhaps we find common ground that serves both interests. "Why would I trust you?" "Because in less than 2 hours this building comes down, and we are all buried regardless of who wins the firefight. Because Webb wants us dead as much as he wants you dead now that you have forced deviation from plan. Because sometimes the enemy of my enemy is not my friend, but he is tactically useful." Elena looked at Vance, saw the question, saw the desperate hope of someone who wanted to believe there was escape route that did not end in martyrdom or meaningless sacrifice. "What are you offering specifically?" "Let us in. Give us the physical files and drives. You can broadcast everything else. Upload copies to every server you can reach. Scatter the data. Do whatever you need to do for insurance. But the originals come with us. We use them as insurance against Webb. You use the distributed copies as insurance against us. Mutually assured survival replaces mutually assured destruction." "And if I refuse your generous offer?" "Then we wait for air to run out, for building to collapse, for Webb to send cleanup team to finish what we started. You die knowing you were correct but dead. We die following orders we should have questioned earlier. Everyone loses except Webb. That seems suboptimal from risk management perspective." Elena heard truth in the voice, or what passed for truth in a world where everyone lied and the only question was which lies served which interests. But there was something else. Exhaustion. The sound of someone who had followed orders until orders became unbearable and now sought exit that preserved some fragment of dignity or survival or both. "Give me 5 minutes to discuss with Colonel Vance." "You have 3. Then we proceed with alternative options that are less mutually beneficial." She moved back to Vance, whispered fast. "What do you think?" "I think he is telling the truth about Webb wanting them dead. I think he sees a way out that does not involve killing everyone in this bunker. I think he is desperate. Desperate men make deals. Question is whether they honor deals after terms are met. Can we risk accepting? Can we risk refusing? You said everyone makes mistakes. Maybe this is his mistake that becomes our opportunity." Elena thought about the voice, about the code phrase exchange in the tunnel, about the feeling that she knew this person not from intelligence briefings but from memory, from shared experience that predated Syria and whatever happened there that broke everyone involved. "There is something else, something I need to tell you before we proceed." "What?" I think I know who he is. I think he was my commanding officer before Syria, before they declared us all killed in action. I think Webb did to him what he tried to do to me. Break us. Remake us. Turn us into tools that do not question orders because questioning has been conditioned out through techniques that are classified and probably illegal. If that is true, can you trust him? I do not know, but I know staying in here guarantees death from hypoxia or structural collapse. Dealing with him gives us probability of survival even if that probability is small. Math favors risk over certainty of death. Vance nodded, checked her weapon one more time, made peace with whatever came next because peace was all you could make when control was illusion. Then we deal, but very carefully. Elena returned to the door, spoke through the steel. We agree to negotiate, but not in the bunker. Neutral ground, central corridor on main level. You bring 2 people maximum, I bring 2 people. Everyone else maintains distance. Weapons holstered. If anyone draws, everyone dies. Those are the terms. Silence, then the voice again. Acceptable terms, 10 minutes. Main corridor junction. 10 minutes. Elena and Vance prepared. Checked weapons. Checked gear. Checked the mental readiness that came from knowing you were walking into a situation that could end in gunfire or handshake, and you needed to be prepared for both with equal commitment. They opened the bunker door, moved into the corridor, up the stairs, 1 level, 2, 3, back to the main floor where lights still worked and air still flowed and everything looked normal except for the knowledge that beneath their feet charges were counting down toward devastation. The central corridor was wide, open, good sight lines, minimal cover, the kind of space that favored whoever shot first but punished everyone equally if shooting started because ricochets and crossfire killed indiscriminately. Elena positioned Vance to her left, back to the wall, 45-degree angle for overlapping fields of fire, tactical spacing that maximized coverage while minimizing vulnerability to single-point failure. They waited. Hale appeared from the east corridor, 1 man with him, tall, lean, sniper's build, Kessler based on the way he moved and scanned for elevated positions out of habit. Both had holstered weapons visible but not threatening. Both moved with careful precision of people who knew they were walking into potential ambush and were prepared but hoping to avoid it. They stopped 20 feet away, far enough that drawing and firing would be mutual suicide, close enough to communicate without shouting, the distance that said we are willing to talk but not stupid about it. Elena looked at Hale, really looked. Face scarred, older, harder than memory suggested, but the eyes were the same. The eyes she had seen 1,000 times in briefings and operations and moments when everything hinged on decisions only he could make, and he made them anyway because that was what leaders did. Danny. The name hit him like physical impact. She saw him flinch. Saw recognition fight through whatever conditioning they had layered over his memory like sediment-burying artifacts. Saw the man beneath the weapon remember that he used to have a name and people who used it. Elena. Her name in his voice was wrong, broken, like audio played through damaged speakers that introduced distortion where clarity should exist, but it was there. The connection, the memory, the proof that whatever Webb had done had not erased everything even if it had damaged most things. They told me you died. Syria, the explosion, I saw the reports. Your name on the casualty list, the memorial service notification. They told me the same about you, captured by insurgents, executed 3 weeks after the bombing. I tried to find proof, requested records. Everything was classified or redacted or mysteriously lost. I thought you were gone. I was gone. For a while. Then they brought me back. or something that looks like me but does not always feel like me when I try to remember things that my mind says did not happen the way I remember them happening. Kessler watched the exchange, confused, concerned, seeing his team leader fall apart in real time through conversation with someone who should be target not trigger for emotional breakdown. "Boss, you know this woman. I knew her long time ago. Different life before conditioning and reassignment. She was my sergeant, my responsibility. Best operator I ever trained or served with. And now she is your target. And now nothing makes sense in ways that suggest everything I thought I knew is wrong." Elena saw the fracture widening, saw the conditioning crack under weight of memory and recognition, saw the moment when Daniel Hale stopped being Webb's weapon and started being Daniel Hale again with all the complications that implied. "Danny, listen to me carefully. Webb did this. Syria was not bad luck or bad intelligence. It was assassination. He sent our entire team into that building knowing it was rigged with explosives. He wanted us dead because we knew about Nightfall from security assessment work, because we asked questions about treaties and legality and things that made people like Webb uncomfortable. That is not possible. It is not only possible, it is documented. Vance has the files. She has the orders with Webb's signature authorizing elimination of witnesses to black projects. We were witnesses. You and me and 12 other operators who thought they were serving their country and were actually serving one man's ambition." Hale swayed slightly, like the ground had shifted beneath him or gravity had changed vectors, like everything he thought was solid had turned liquid. "If that is true, then everything I have done for 8 years is wrong. Every mission, every order, every person I hurt or killed thinking I was following legitimate command authority. It is worse than wrong, Danny. It is treason. Webb is using CIA resources and military personnel to conduct unsanctioned operations, to silence whistleblowers, to deploy weapons that violate international law. He is everything we swore to protect against, and he turned us into his instruments." Kessler spoke carefully. "Sir, we need to focus on immediate tactical situation. Building comes down in 90 minutes. Whatever happened in Syria 8 years ago, we need to deal with right now first and historical grievances later." Elena nodded. "He is correct. We make deal or we die. Your choice determines outcome." Hale looked at Kessler, at Elena, at Vance standing against the wall with her hand near her weapon and her face showing the expression of someone watching their salvation or execution negotiate in real time with equal probability. "You said broadcast. You have capability. Vance can transmit on emergency frequencies using Cold War-era equipment, and long wave, ionospheric bounce. Everything about Nightfall goes public to every radio receiver in 200-mile radius. Treaties violated, orbital weapons, Webb's involvement, all of it. And the physical evidence. You take it, use it against Webb, prove you attempted mission completion. Prove you are still assets worth maintaining instead of liabilities requiring elimination. He will know we could have stopped the broadcast. Then you tell him transmission was already in progress when you arrived. That data was in motion. That stopping us would have required actions that would have exposed the operation to base security. That you negotiated and minimized damage. He can accept that narrative or he can admit he sent operators to kill American personnel on American soil for illegal purposes. His choice. Hale processed the logic, saw the trap, saw the way out that was also the way deeper into complications, saw the choice between certainty of death and uncertainty of survival. If we do this, we are choosing sides, against Webb, against the agency that employs us, against everything we have been told to believe. You already chose sides when you requested negotiation instead of forcing breach. You already betrayed him by not following orders without question. Question now is whether betrayal is partial or complete. Kessler interrupted. Boss, movement detected. North corridor. Multiple contacts approaching fast. Elena felt her stomach drop into free fall. Saw Hale's face change from negotiation to tactical assessment. Saw recognition and confusion and the cold understanding of disaster arriving. That is not my team. I deployed 3 people in reserve positions. This contact shows 6 signatures. Then who are they? The answer came over building PA system. Voice calm, professional, general officer cadence that suggested authority and expected compliance. All personnel in Hangar 7. This is General Marcus Webb. You are in the presence of hostile forces attempting to access classified systems. Base security is responding. Maintain cover positions. Do not approach suspects. Do not engage. Wait for all clear signal. Elena understood instantly. He sent a second team, cleaners, not to support your operation, to eliminate you along with us. Hale keyed his radio with urgency. All elements, report status immediately. Bishop's voice came back strained. Boss, we have multiple hostiles converging on our position. 12 contacts. CIA tactical patches. They are not here to provide support. Chen's transmission was broken by gunfire sounds. Same situation East Corridor. They cut us off from Rally Point. We are boxed in. Ramirez. Surrounded. They are not requesting surrender. They are establishing kill box with interlocking fields of fire. Hale looked at Elena. Saw the same calculation happening in her eyes. Saw the moment when former enemies became temporary allies because the alternative was death for everyone, and mathematics favored any survival over ideological purity. New deal, immediate implementation. We work together. Stop the cleaners. Get your broadcast transmitted. Get my team extracted. Figure out Webb later when we are not all about to die. Elena nodded, turned to Vance. Can you transmit alone without assistance? If I have 30 minutes undisturbed, yes. Then you return to the bunker immediately. Lock yourself inside. Start transmitting everything. We buy you 30 minutes. You cannot hold against 12 operators with just 6 people. Watch us try, now move. Vance ran. Back toward the bunker access stairs. Back to the equipment that might save them if they could buy her enough time. Elena and Hale and Kessler stood in the central corridor and heard the sound of professional soldiers moving to kill them. Heard the radio chatter. Heard the coordination that came from teams who trained together and killed together and were very effective at both. Hale keyed his radio. All elements channel. New mission parameters. Defend the bunker at all costs. Protect the broadcast transmission. Engage cleaners as hostile targets. Non-lethal methods preferred, but survival takes absolute priority over all other considerations. Bishop responded with sound of relief in his voice. Boss, we are authorized to go weapons hot against CIA personnel. We are authorized to go weapons hot against anyone attempting to kill us regardless of agency affiliation or claimed authority. We survive first. Explain later if there is a later. Copy that clearly. Finally have straightforward orders. Elena moved to firing position. Behind support column with good cover and excellent sight lines down 2 corridors. Hale took opposite angle. Overlapping fields of fire with minimal dead space. Kessler went vertical, climbing into ductwork that ran along ceiling. Sniper doing what snipers did best, which was finding high ground and making life complicated for anyone in the open. The cleaners came fast, professional entry, stacked formations. flash bangs preceding movement, smoke grenades to cover approach, everything by doctrine, everything textbook, which made them predictable to people who wrote the textbooks. Elena let them enter the corridor, let them commit to the approach, let them think they had initiative and momentum. Then she fired, controlled pairs, sent her mass on point man, saw him go down. Body armor caught the rounds, but kinetic energy transferred, and he was alive but out of the fight and creating obstacle for people behind him. Hale engaged from his angle with suppressive fire, not trying to kill, trying to slow advance and create decision paralysis, trying to make them think twice about rushing forward into prepared defensive positions with unknown capabilities. Kessler fired from above, single precise shots, not at people but at equipment. A rifle here knocked from hands, a radio there destroyed mid-transmission, disabling without killing because killing meant permanent consequences, and maybe consequences could still be managed if casualties were minimized. The cleaners retreated, regrouped, adapted, came again from different angles having learned from first contact, professional, dangerous, the kind of opponents that made you work for every advantage and punished every mistake immediately. The firefight settled into rhythm. Attack, defend, pause, regroup, attack again. The kind of sustained engagement that burned ammunition and patience and made you realize that every combat narrative that ended with heroes walking away left out the hours of grinding attrition warfare that came before the walking. Elena changed magazines. Her fourth, 3 remaining. Math getting progressively worse. She looked across the corridor at Hale, saw him doing the same calculation with the same conclusion, running the numbers that said they would run dry before cleaners did because cleaners had logistics support and they had what they brought and nothing more. Hale keyed his radio. Vance, transmission status. Vance's voice came back strained but focused. 15 minutes complete. 15 more required. Maintain position. Copy, hang in there. We are holding them. Kessler called down from his elevated position. Boss, I am down to final magazine. 3 rounds remaining. Bishop over radio. Same situation here. We are burning through ammunition faster than engagement time allows sustainability. Chen, tech support does not help in firefight. I have 1 magazine remaining. The cleaners knew it too. Could hear the decrease in rate of fire. Could sense the mathematical tipping point approaching where defenders ran out of bullets and attackers could advance without effective opposition. They pressed harder, faster, accepting casualties as cost of mission completion. 3 wounded requiring evacuation. 1 dead from Kessler headshot that was reflex not intention when cleaner appeared in his crosshairs at moment Kessler was pulling trigger. Numbers that would end careers in training, but meant nothing in operations where success was the only metric that generated positive performance evaluations. Elena fired her last magazine dry, dropped it with clatter on concrete floor, drew her sidearm. 15 rounds. After that, hand-to-hand combat. After that, nothing but hope that someone intervened before mathematics completed its inevitable conclusion. She looked at Hale, saw him looking back, saw the recognition, the shared understanding. The moment when 2 professionals acknowledged they had fought well, but math was undefeated champion and time was running out faster than solutions could arrive. He moved toward her position, under active fire, tactically stupid, suicide by any rational assessment. But he moved anyway because sometimes stupid was the only option remaining when smart had exhausted itself and given up. He made it somehow, slid into her cover position, close enough to talk without shouting over gunfire. This is not how I wanted to see you again. Could be worse. How exactly? We could already be dead. He almost laughed. Would have if bullets were not snapping past their position with the regularity of heartbeats and the promise of eventual accuracy through volume. Elena, I need you to know something. Whatever I did under conditioning, whatever missions I ran, whatever orders I followed, it was not me, or it was me but broken and reprogrammed. They got into my head, changed things, made me forget what mattered and remember things that did not matter. I know, Danny. Webb is expert at breaking people. He just forgets that broken things sometimes learn to break other things back. If we survive this engagement, when we survive this, if we survive, I want to remember properly, really remember, Syria, our team, the things we did before the world became this. Can you help me do that? I can try. No guarantees. Memory is complicated when someone has been editing it for 8 years with techniques we do not fully understand. Trying is sufficient. The cleaners advanced for final assault, overwhelming force, the kind that ends firefights by removing one side from the equation through mathematics and bullets. Hale and Elena stood together, back to back, the way they had stood 100 times in training, the way partners stood when the fight had gotten close and personal, and everything depended on trusting the person behind you to cover angles you could not see. They fired, smooth, coordinated, each shot deliberate, each movement synchronized, the kind of teamwork that took years to build and seconds to remember even when memory said it never happened. The cleaners faltered, stopped, pulled back. Because down the corridor behind them, base security had arrived. Real security, not compromised, not controlled by Webb. Just soldiers doing their job of protecting their installation from people who should not be shooting in it regardless of claimed authority. And overhead, through the PA system, Vance's voice began broadcasting, reading classified documents over emergency frequencies, transmitting everything about nightfall across channels that every radio in 200 miles would receive. The truth was in motion, unstoppable, viral, already propagating at light speed through ionospheric bounce that made jamming impossible without shutting down every radio receiver in the region. The cleaners heard it too, recognized that mission failure had become mission exposure. That staying meant prosecution and leaving meant maybe surviving to deny involvement later when lawyers made words mean whatever words needed to mean. They left, fast, professional tactical withdrawal, no panic, just acknowledgement that situation had deteriorated beyond salvage and discretion was preferable to valor when valor meant prison. Hale lowered his weapon, looked at Elena, both covered in concrete dust and spent brass casings and the exhaustion that came from sustained combat. You did it, broadcast is live. We did it together, like old times. Better than old times. Old times got us killed officially. This time we lived. Base security approached, weapons ready, demanding answers, demanding identification, demanding explanations for why their installation sounded like active combat zone. Elena raised her hands with weapon pointed safe direction. I am Elena Reeves, Master Sergeant, 5th Special Forces Group, technically deceased according to official paperwork but obviously not. I can explain everything, but you will need to contact Defense Intelligence Agency first because this situation is very complicated. The security chief looked at her, at Hale, at the spent brass and the blood trails and the evidence of firefight that should not have happened on American soil during peacetime on American military installation. Ma'am, this explanation better be exceptional because the paperwork alone will take weeks. It is exceptional, trust me. It starts with a general who thought he could weaponize space and murder anyone who objected. It gets significantly worse from there. In the Pentagon War Room, Marcus Webb listened to Vance's broadcast, heard her reading classified files over open frequencies with the calm professionalism of someone who had already accepted that her career was over, but her conscience would survive. He picked up his phone, started to dial his attorney, stopped halfway through because who do you call when the exposure is already complete, when the secret is already public, when the weapon you spent years building turns in your hand and cuts you instead of the target? He set the phone down, looked at his aide who was younger and still believed institutions were immortal, saw the fear, saw the calculation, saw the moment when loyalty became liability. Sir, we need to issue official statement, deny the allegations, claim disinformation campaign. Deny with what evidence? She has documents, files, my signature on orders. Denying just confirms we have something worth hiding. Then what do we do? Webb looked at the screen showing the operation site, saw his teams retreating, saw base security flooding the area, saw the tactical situation transform from deniable black operation into public relations disaster that would dominate congressional hearings for months. We prepare for tribunal, for investigations, for the systematic dismantling of everything I built over 20 years. We accept that this particular battle is lost and start planning for the next war. What next war? The one where I convince enough senators that nightfall was necessary, that orbital weapons are inevitable, that someone will deploy them and better us than China or Russia or whoever gets there first. The one where necessity trumps legality because fear trumps principle. It always has. It always will. The aide said nothing, because there was nothing to say, because Webb was probably correct, because fear was effective and principle was expensive and history favored whoever scared people more effectively than whoever inspired them to be better. In Hangar 7, Elena and Hale stood in the central corridor and watched base security process the scene, watched paramedics treat wounded, watched the machinery of military bureaucracy begin transforming chaos into paperwork and paperwork into official narrative. Vance emerged from the bunker, laptop in hand, face exhausted but peaceful, the peace that came from knowing you had done the right thing regardless of cost. It is complete, every file, every document, every piece of evidence, broadcasted on 17 frequencies, uploaded to 40 backup servers across 12 countries. Webb can deny, but he cannot bury. Elena nodded. You saved many lives today, Colonel, possibly including your own. I had help. From a cleaner who was not a cleaner and a team that chose honor over orders when orders became unconscionable. That is worth remembering. Hale approached, stood awkwardly, like someone who did not know the protocol for thanking someone whose death you were ordered to cause. Colonel, for what it is worth, I apologize, for the threat, for the fear, for being the weapon someone else aimed at you. Sergeant Major, we all serve something. You served Webb until you served something better. That transition is called growth. Accept it. Base Security Chief interrupted. Colonel's rank, career visible in scars and posture and eyes that had seen everything. We need statements. We need evidence. We need explanations that do not sound like fiction when repeated to investigators. Can you provide those? Elena spoke. We can, but first you need to secure this building. There are demolition charges on primary support beams. Timer was set for 600, which is, she checked her watch, 47 minutes from now. I do not know if charges were disarmed when your arrival complicated the tactical situation. The chief's face went white. Demolition charges, how many? Enough to bring down 3 levels. Enough to kill everyone inside. enough to make it look like structural failure if nobody investigated closely. Chen, Hale keyed his radio. The charge's current status. Chen's voice came back, shaky but certain. Boss, I deactivated all charges at 05:47 hours, 13 minutes before detonation. We are clear. All 4 positions confirmed safe. Bravo, Charlie, Delta, Echo, all timers stopped and disconnected. You are absolutely certain? I am absolutely certain. I placed them. I wired them. I just disarmed them. Give me 30 minutes and I will remove them completely. The security chief nodded to his explosive ordnance disposal team. Get down there. Verify his work. If he is lying, arrest him. If he is telling truth, I will buy him a drink personally. Chen responded over radio. I will accept the drink. Been a very long night. Elena felt tension drain from muscles that had been tense for hours. The kind of release that left you hollow, empty, ready to sleep for a week and wake up in a world that made more sense than this one. Hale moved close to her, spoke quietly. What happens now to us, to my team? Investigations, debriefings, questions. Many questions about who knew what and when and why actions were taken. Whether we answer honestly or creatively depends on how much we want to cooperate versus how much we want to survive with freedom intact. Surviving with freedom sounds optimal. Then we find the space between full truth and useful truth. The place where we tell enough to satisfy investigators and keep enough classified to stay valuable as assets. The place where ghosts live because being visible gets you killed. We could run, team has skills, contacts, resources, could disappear internationally. Could, but then we are running forever, always looking over shoulders, always wondering when someone locates us. I spent 8 years as Ghost. I am tired of disappearing, want to try existing for a while. So we stay, face the hearings, hope the outcome is not firing squad or federal prison. Something like that, better than alternatives. They stood in the corridor, former team leader and former sergeant, separated by 8 years and conditioning and orders that tried to make them forget they were human, but standing together anyway because, in the end, everyone needs someone who understands the weight and helps carry it, even when carrying requires sacrifice. Vance joined them, laptop secured, files transferred to multiple secure locations. Mission accomplished with complications, but accomplished nonetheless. Thank you, both of you, your teams. Without you, Nightfall would have deployed. Webb would have won, Truth would have stayed buried, and I would have stayed dead. Without you, we would still be following orders we should have questioned years ago. Hale's voice carried weight of recognition. You gave us reason to remember why we became soldiers instead of weapons. That is worth the complications that will follow. Base security began processing the scene properly, taking statements, photographing evidence, beginning the documentation that would fill warehouses and occupy lawyers and keep investigators employed for years, while generating reports that nobody would read but everyone would reference. Elena looked at the chaos, at the spent brass still being collected, at the blood trails being photographed, at the evidence of a fight that should not have happened but did because sometimes the only way to stop wrong things was to break rules about stopping wrong things. She thought about cleaning floors, about pushing carts, about being invisible while watching, about the quiet life that was not life at all but waiting for something to matter. She thought about Syria, about teams that died, about survivors who got broken and remade, about 8 years of believing she was the only one left standing. She looked at Hale, saw him looking back, saw the recognition that some connections survived even when memory did not, that some teams could not be dissolved no matter how hard bureaucrats tried. Danny, Yeah. When this is over, after investigations, after hearings, after everything settles into whatever passes for normal now, we should get coffee. We should talk about Syria, about what we remember and what we were conditioned to forget, about the teams we lost and the teams we still have. About the teams we still have. He smiled, damaged but real, the smile of someone remembering how smiling worked. Security moved them toward processing, toward statements and evidence collection, and the beginning of official version that would never quite capture what really happened, but would be close enough for government work and historical record. Elena walked, Hale beside her, Vance behind them, teams assembling from chaos, order emerging from disorder the way it always did when professionals remembered their training and applied it to problems training never anticipated. Behind them, Chen worked on the demolition charges, disarming, securing, making safe the explosives that were supposed to kill everyone and instead killed nothing except Webb's plans. Behind them, Kessler descended from the ducts, weapon empty but spirit intact, alive when odds suggested otherwise, lucky when luck should have expired, grateful in ways only soldiers who survived impossible odds could be grateful. Behind them, Bishop and Ramirez linked up, compared notes, shared ammunition counts and battle damage assessments and the dark humor that came from facing death and declining the invitation. Behind them, a building that should have collapsed stood solid, waiting for dawn, waiting for inspectors, waiting for the next chapter in the story that was not finished, but was no longer being written exclusively by people who wanted it buried. The night was ending, morning was coming, and with it, consequences, questions, investigations that would determine whether they were heroes or criminals or something complicated that fit neither category well. But they were alive together, and for now that was enough. Dawn came slowly to Edwards Air Force Base, the way dawn came to places where violence had visited during night. Gray light filtering through windows that had witnessed things official reports would sanitize into acceptable language and plausible deniability. The kind of light that showed damage without judgment, bullet holes in walls telling stories in ballistic trajectories, blood on concrete floor spelling messages no one wanted to read. Spent brass casings scattered like seeds that would grow nothing except questions and investigations, and the slow grinding machinery of military justice. Elena sat in an interview room that existed in the space between friendly conversation and hostile interrogation. Metal table, 2 chairs, recording equipment with red light definitely recording even though someone had tried to make it subtle by positioning it behind decorative panel. Defense Intelligence Agency credentials on the table. 2 investigators. One older with gray hair and eyes that had seen every lie. One younger still believing truth mattered more than narrative. Both wearing expressions of people who had conducted 1,000 interviews and believed approximately none of what they heard. Master Sergeant Reeves, according to official records, you died in Syria 8 years ago, killed in action. Records confirm this. Memorial service was held at Fort Bragg. Death benefits paid to next of kin through proper channels. Yet here you are, alive, employed under false identity as sanitation worker at classified facility, under a name that is legally deceased. Want to explain that contradiction? Elena looked at her hands, at the cuts and bruises from a night that felt like a month compressed into hours, at the evidence that ghosts could bleed even when paperwork said they did not exist according to federal databases and Social Security Administration records. I was recruited after Syria, given a choice that was not really a choice. Stay dead and work for DIA in unofficial capacity with no official protection or acknowledgement, or come back to life and face questions about how I survived when my entire team did not survive. questions that would require answers about operations that cannot be discussed. I chose dead. Seemed simpler for everyone involved. Simpler for who specifically? For everyone who needed the Syria operation to stay classified and buried. For the people who sent us into that compound knowing it was rigged with explosives and waiting for us. For the chain of command that authorized assassination of American soldiers and classified it as acceptable casualties in pursuit of strategic objectives. The younger investigator leaned forward, eager, still believed in accountability. You are accusing senior leadership of deliberately killing American soldiers through friendly fire masquerading as enemy action. That is an extraordinary allegation requiring extraordinary proof. It is not an allegation. It is documented fact now that Colonel Vance broadcasted the files, Webb's signature on authorization documents, orders for elimination of Special Forces personnel with knowledge of classified weapons programs that violated treaty obligations. My team was eliminated according to plan. I survived through luck. Got recruited afterward to ensure my silence through employment that made me dependent on their continued approval. And you stayed quiet for 8 years, then suddenly decided to violate your cover and engage in firefight on American soil with American personnel. What changed after 8 years of compliance? They ordered me to stand down while 43 innocent people died to cover up one woman telling the truth about treaty violations. That changed the equation. Some orders are illegal regardless of who gives them. Following illegal orders makes you criminal, not soldier. The older investigator studied her with eyes that had seen this movie before and knew how it ended. Recognition maybe, or respect. The kind that came from understanding that some orders tested the boundary between duty and conscience, and sometimes conscience had to win or nothing meant anything. Tell us about Sergeant Major Hale, your relationship with him, how long you have known him, what your connection was before last night. I served under his command, Syria deployment, and 2 years before that. He was my commanding officer, best leader I ever had or worked with. The kind who brought people home when bringing them home required personal risk and creative interpretation of orders. And you did not know he survived Syria, did not know he was conducting black operations for 8 years. I was told he died, captured by insurgents, interrogated, executed, body never recovered. 3 weeks after the bombing that killed my team, I tried to find proof, requested casualty reports through proper channels. Everything was classified beyond my clearance level or mysteriously lost in administrative errors. I assumed he was gone like everyone else. But he was not gone. He was operational, conducting missions for CIA that included operations targeting you and Colonel Vance last night. He was following orders, orders from Webb, orders backed by psychological conditioning and memory manipulation, and 8 years of being told that what he remembered was wrong and what they told him was correct. That is not the same as choosing to harm people through free will. You are saying Hale is victim rather than perpetrator. I am saying Hale is weapon that was used against its will through techniques that should be illegal if they are not already illegal. There is moral and legal difference between choosing to kill and being programmed to kill through conditioning that removes choice. He broke programming when confronted with truth. That should count for something in final assessment. The investigators exchanged looks, the silent communication of partners who had worked together long enough to speak without words through glances and micro-expressions. We will need detailed statements, everything that happened hour by hour, everything you know about Webb's operations over the last 8 years, everything about your recruitment and assignments and the people you reported to. I will cooperate fully, but I want immunity, for myself, for Hale, for his entire team. They chose correctly when it mattered most. That should matter more than the questionable orders they followed before they understood those orders were designed to produce outcomes that violated law. That is not our decision to make. Then find someone whose decision it is. Because if you want Webb and everyone above him in the chain, you need us as witnesses. We are the evidence. We are the testimony. We are the proof that this conspiracy goes deeper than one ambitious general. You burn us and you burn your case against the system that enabled him. The older investigator stood. Wait here. They left, door closing with click of electronic lock. Elena sat alone with the recording equipment and the gray light through window and the knowledge that she had just leveraged her freedom against the possibility of justice. That she had bet everything on the idea that someone in the system wanted to fix it more than they wanted to protect it from exposure. Across the base, in an identical interview room, Hale faced his own interrogators. Military Intelligence, Criminal Investigation Division, Judge Advocate General, the kind of people who decided whether you went home with honorable discharge or went to Fort Leavenworth with federal prisoner number. Sergeant Major Hale, you conducted unauthorized military operations on United States soil against federal installation. You planted explosive devices in federal facility. You engaged federal personnel with lethal force. You endangered civilian contractors. The charges list is extensive and serious. Your defense is what exactly? Hale looked at the charges printed on paper in legal language, at the terminology that turned survival into crime and resistance into treason, at the system that wanted him to have followed orders that would have murdered innocents and called that justice while calling his refusal to murder innocents a crime. I followed orders until those orders required me to commit murder of American citizens to conceal treaty violations and weapons development that violates international law. I stopped following illegal orders. I engaged CIA personnel who were attempting to complete those murders. I protected a whistleblower who was exposing illegal programs. If that is criminal according to military law, I am guilty. If that is duty according to constitutional oath, I am innocent. You decide which legal framework matters more. You do not get to decide which orders to follow, Sergeant Major. Chain of command exists for reasons involving discipline and unit cohesion. Chain of command requires lawful orders. Orders to commit murder of non-combatants are not lawful under any interpretation of Uniform Code of Military Justice or Geneva Conventions. Orders to destroy evidence of war crimes are not lawful. Orders to kill whistleblowers to prevent exposure of treaty violations are not lawful. I followed the law. Webb violated it. Prosecute accordingly if law still means something. The lead JAG officer tapped his pen against folder. Thinking, calculating, running scenarios where prosecuting Hale meant exposing Webb meant exposing the system that enabled Webb meant congressional investigations that would consume budgets and careers. You understand that testifying against Webb puts you in considerable danger. That people who threaten powerful networks tend to have accidents involving single vehicle crashes or suicides with no witnesses. I understand that staying silent puts me in worse danger. That being loose end means eventually getting tied off permanently. That my only safety is making sure enough people know what I know that killing me accomplishes nothing except confirming everything I said. Your team, Bishop Chen, Ramirez, Kessler, they followed your orders last night. They engaged federal agents. They participated in actions that could be classified as mutiny or treason or sedition depending on how creatively we apply legal theory. What happens to them? They followed my orders because I convinced them those orders were morally and legally correct. They trusted my judgment. If someone pays consequences for last night, it should be me as commander. not them as subordinates following what they believed were lawful orders. Noble sentiment but legally inaccurate. They are adults. They made choices. Adults who make choices face consequences. That is how military justice operates. Hale felt something cold settle in his chest. The realization that saving Elena and Vance and exposing Webb might have cost his team everything. That leadership meant responsibility for outcomes you did not intend but could not prevent once set in motion. What specific consequences are we discussing? That depends on cooperation, on testimony quality, on whether the narrative they provide supports the narrative we need to prosecute Webb without exposing every questionable classified program he touched over 20 years of operations. You want them to lie. We want them to be selective about truth, to focus on Webb's clearly illegal orders rather than the numerous operations before last night that existed in legal gray areas, to protect the institution while removing the individual who corrupted it. And if they refuse, if they insist on telling complete truth including everything, then prosecution becomes unavoidable. Court-martial, dishonorable discharge, federal prison sentences, loss of all benefits, permanent criminal records, the full weight of military justice applied to people who broke ranks even if breaking ranks was morally justified. Hale understood the game. Cooperate and stay useful as controlled witnesses. Refuse and become cautionary examples. The choice between compromised freedom and principled imprisonment. I need to talk to my team before any of us agree to anything. That can be arranged, but quickly. Political pressure to resolve this quietly is immense. Media is already asking questions about gunfire reported at Edwards. Windows close fast when powerful people feel exposed. They left him alone in the room with metal table and recording equipment, and the knowledge that he had led his team into a situation where doing right thing had wrong consequences, and the system punished honesty more reliably than it punished murder when murder was classified. In the medical treatment facility, Kessler sat on examination table while corpsmen checked his injuries. Bruised ribs from taking cover behind concrete barrier. Sprained wrist from rappelling down air duct. Exhaustion. The accumulated damage of a night spent fighting people who should have been allies against people who definitely were enemies. Bishop occupied the next bed. Chen sat on the one after. Ramirez stood by the door because sitting still was not something she could manage when adrenaline still flowed and questions had not been answered, and the future was uncertain in ways that made planning impossible. Boss is in interrogation right now, Chen spoke nervously, young enough to still believe systems were rational, think they will charge him with crimes. They will charge all of us if they want to discourage future whistleblowers, make examples, show what happens when you disobey even when disobedience is morally correct. Bishop's voice carried cynicism earned through experience. I have seen this before. System protects itself first. Justice comes second if at all. So we are finished regardless of doing the right thing. Chen again, processing the reality that virtue was not rewarded reliably. We are not finished. Kessler spoke quietly but with certainty that steadied panic. We are leverage. They need us to prosecute Webb successfully, need our testimony, need our cooperation. That gives us negotiating power if we use it intelligently. How do we use leverage intelligently? We make collective deal, immunity for testimony, protection for compliance. They get Webb convicted, we get to walk away free. Standard witness protection exchange. And if they refuse the deal? Kessler looked at his team, at people he had fought beside for years across multiple continents, people he trusted more than institution or ideology, people he would protect even when protecting them meant sacrificing himself. Then we refuse to cooperate selectively. We tell everything, every operation, every illegal order, every rule bent and law broken in the name of national security. We burn it all down and let justice sort the ashes however justice sorts things. That is suicide. Ramirez voiced the practical concern. They will bury us, literally or figuratively, but definitely permanently. Maybe, but maybe that is the price. Maybe someone has to pay for all the years of following orders we should have questioned earlier. Maybe that someone is us because we have knowledge and platform to make it matter. Bishop spoke carefully, like testing thin ice. Tommy, you have family, wife, kids, mortgage, normal life waiting if you do not destroy it with principle. I have family that I want to look in the eyes without lying about who I am and what I have done. I have kids I want to teach that some things matter more than safety and comfort. I have life that is only worth living if I can live with myself afterward. This matters. Chen nodded slowly, processing the weight of choice. You are correct that this matters, but I am scared of consequences. Being scared is appropriate response. Means you are paying attention to reality, but being scared does not mean being wrong about what needs to be done. The door opened. Hale entered, looked at his team, saw the same question on every face written in different ways. What happens now? What did we buy with last night's choices? What is the price of doing right when right was unauthorized? They want cooperation, want testimony that focuses on Webb without exposing the classified programs he ran previously, want us to be selective about truth in exchange for immunity from prosecution. And if we refuse, Kessler asking the question everyone needed answered. Then prosecution, court-martial for everyone, prison sentences, everything we earned stripped away and replaced with criminal record and dishonor. Silence filled the room, the kind that came from realizing that heroism in reality cost more than heroism in movies suggested, that standing up often meant being knocked down, that the system rewarded silence and punished honesty because honesty threatened stability in ways that corruption did not. Bishop spoke first. I will cooperate. I have nothing waiting except more contracts and more questionable orders. If selective truth gets me immunity, I take that deal without hesitation. Chen followed. Same decision. I am too young for prison. I will say whatever they need me to say within reason. Ramirez, I want witness protection program, new identity, relocation to somewhere Webb's network cannot find me easily. That is my price for cooperation. All eyes turned to Kessler, the oldest, the one with most to lose because he had built most outside of this life, the one whose silence or speech would define how this story ended for everyone. I want something different than what you are offering. What specifically? I want you three to get full immunity, complete immunity, no conditions attached, no prosecution possibility. You walk away clean. In exchange, I take full responsibility. I say I gave the orders, I convinced you, I led what they will call mutiny. I am the one who should face consequences, not any of you. Tommy, no. Hale's response was immediate. That is not how teams work. We succeed together or fail together. That is the code. We failed together for 8 years, following Webb, following orders that were wrong, doing things that kept us awake at night. This is us succeeding together, by making sure most of us survive, by paying the price with the person who should pay it because he is oldest and has less future to lose. You have kids. I have kids who will understand someday that their father chose correctly even when correct was hard. That is better legacy than having father who stayed silent and safe and corrupted. They will be proud eventually, even if they are confused initially. They will not accept this. They want testimony from all of us. Then they get testimony from all of us. But on official record, I am leader. I am the one who convinced you to disobey. Courts martial me. Let the others walk free. That is the deal, or we burn everything and take chances with complete exposure. Hale stared at his friend, saw determination, saw sacrifice, saw the kind of leadership that made people follow you into hell because they knew you would take point and absorb the worst of what hell offered. I cannot let you do this, Tommy. You cannot stop me. I am making this choice. For my family who needs financial support more than they need me present. For my team who deserves future more than I deserve absolution. For the idea that someone should pay something for standing up. Let it be me. The room filled with silence of people facing gap between what they wanted and what they could have. Between justice and survival. Between the ending they earned and the ending they would get regardless of what they earned. Chen spoke quietly. This is wrong. You should not have to sacrifice yourself so we can be safe. Someone has to sacrifice something. Better me than you. You are young. You have decades to build something better. I have decades behind me and not as many ahead. The math favors this choice. The door opened again. JAG officer. We need answers now. The window is closing. Cooperate under our terms or face prosecution. Last chance for deal. Kessler stood, walked to the officer, spoke with clarity that left no room for negotiation. I will cooperate fully. I will testify against Webb completely. I will provide full accounting of operations and orders. In exchange, my team gets immunity. Bishop, Chen, Ramirez, Hale, full immunity. No prosecution, no charges. They walk away free. And you? I face whatever consequences come from leading unauthorized action against federal personnel. Court-martial, prison, whatever price leadership demands when leadership chooses conscience over orders. The JAG officer studied him, calculating, seeing the deal. One scapegoat in exchange for 4 cooperative witnesses. 1 career destroyed in exchange for 4 preserved. The mathematics that institutions loved because it resolved problems without requiring systemic change. That arrangement is acceptable. I will draft immunity agreements for the others. One more condition. I want 72 hours with my family, before arrest, before trial, before everything falls apart permanently. I want 3 days to explain to my wife why I am doing this, and to tell my kids that their father loved them enough to do right thing even when cost was everything. Granted, 72 hours. Then you report to Fort Leavenworth for pretrial confinement. Agreed. The officer left. Kessler turned back to his team, saw shock, saw grief, saw the recognition that this was happening and could not be stopped because he had already decided and his decisions were final. Tommy, Bishop's voice broke, you do not have to do this for us. I do have to. Someone has to pay. Someone has to show that standing up means something even when systems make it expensive. Someone has to be the example that makes the next person brave enough to say no when they should say no. I can be that person. We could all refuse together, all face charges together, all go down together. We could, but then Webb wins different way, because we become criminals instead of heroes, because narrative becomes rogue operators instead of whistleblowers stopping illegal weapons, because system gets to dismiss us instead of addressing what we exposed. This way, I am the criminal. You are the witnesses. Webb is the defendant. The story matters more than my freedom. Hale felt something break inside. The thing that made him believe that leadership meant protecting everyone completely. That no one got left behind under any circumstances. That team stayed together through everything regardless of cost. Tommy, I am sorry. This is my fault ultimately. I should have questioned orders years earlier, should have seen Webb for what he was sooner, should have protected you from this outcome. You protected me from worse. You gave me reason to remember that I am more than weapon, that we all are more than tools. That is worth the cost I am paying. They stood in the medical facility and said goodbye without saying goodbye explicitly, because saying it would make it real and permanent, would mean accepting that some sacrifices were necessary and noble and completely unfair simultaneously in ways that made you angry at universe. 3 days later, Kessler sat at his kitchen table in base housing with his wife Sarah and children Emily and David, trying to explain why he was going to federal prison for doing what he believed was right, trying to make them understand that sometimes cost of integrity was everything you built, and paying it anyway was what separated humans from machines. His wife Sarah cried silently. His daughter Emily asked questions that had no good answers. His son David stayed quiet the way teenage boys stayed quiet when their world collapsed, and they had no tools to process it except silence. I do not understand this. Sarah's voice was thick with tears. You stopped bad people. You saved lives. Why are you being punished while they walk free? Because I disobeyed orders. Because in military justice system, disobedience is sometimes worse than murder when murder is ordered. Because system protects itself, and people like me become examples to discourage future disobedience. Can you fight this? Appeal. Get civilian lawyers. I could fight, but fighting means my team faces charges too, means Bishop and Chen and Ramirez go to prison, means Hale gets court-martialed. This way they walk free. This way I go alone. That is not fair to you or to us. No, but fair stopped mattering when we all decided to stop weapons program that violates every treaty we signed. Fair is luxury. Sometimes you settle for right instead of fair when you cannot have both. Emily spoke, 14 years old enough to understand sacrifice but young enough to hate it. Will we see you? Can we visit prison? Yes, Leavenworth allows family visits, not frequently, but periodically. You will have to drive 8 hours. It will be hard, but yes, we can see each other sometimes. How long will you be gone? I do not know with certainty. The charges are serious. Could be 10 years, could be 20, could be less with good behavior and political pressure, but assume long duration. Assume you build lives without me watching directly. Assume I miss graduations and weddings and grandchildren. Sarah reached across table, took his hand. I will wait however long it takes. I will be here when you get out. Do not wait for me. You are 42 years old. You have life ahead. If you meet someone better, if you want to move on, do it without guilt. Do not sacrifice your happiness for my choices. These are not just your choices. These are our choices as family. We stand together through this. David finally spoke. Dad, are you scared? Kessler looked at his son, saw himself 30 years earlier, saw the question beneath the question. Not are you scared of prison? Are you scared you made wrong choice? Are you scared that principle costs more than it is worth? I am terrified, honestly, but I am more scared of the person I would become if I stayed silent, more scared of teaching you that safety matters more than truth, more scared of looking in mirror and seeing coward instead of father. You are not a coward. Then this was the only choice available. They sat at table and talked about logistics, about power of attorney and finances and schools, and everything that needed planning when one parent was about to be absent for indefinite duration. They talked until words ran out, until there was nothing left except holding each other and trying to memorize the feeling because memory would have to sustain them through whatever came next. 3 days after that conversation, Kessler reported to Fort Leavenworth. surrendered himself for pretrial confinement, wore civilian clothes because he was no longer authorized to wear the uniform he had served in for 20 years, walked into United States disciplinary barracks and became inmate instead of soldier. His team watched from distance outside the gate, not allowed to be present during intake, not allowed to speak to him directly, not allowed to do anything except witness the cost of the choice they had all made together, but only he would pay for. "This is wrong," Chen spoke angrily. "He should not be in there while we walk free." "It is wrong." Elena stood with them because Hale had asked her to come, because witnessing mattered. But wrong does not mean changeable. Sometimes you just carry the weight and try to make it mean something. "How long until trial?" 6 months minimum, maybe longer. Military justice moves slowly when cases are politically sensitive. They will try to negotiate plea deals, reduce charges for guilty plea, lesser sentence for cooperation, standard pressure tactics to avoid public trial. Will he take a deal? Tommy? No. He will demand full trial. Will force them to prove every charge publicly. Will make them explain on official record why stopping illegal weapons program is criminal. Will use courtroom as platform to expose what they want hidden. Bishop spoke. Then we testify, we tell truth, we make sure record shows what really happened. You will testify, and it will not matter significantly, because verdict is already determined. They need someone to punish. Tommy volunteered. Justice is story we tell ourselves when systems do what they were always going to do regardless of facts. You are cynical. I am realistic. I have been inside the machine longer than you, have seen how it processes people who threaten it. Tommy knew this, chose it anyway with full knowledge. That is courage. Stupid courage maybe, but courage nonetheless. Hale stood silent, watching the building that held his friend, his mentor, the man who had steadied the team when Hale's judgment failed, the man who was paying price Hale should have paid as commander. I should be in there instead of him. You are more useful out here. You have information, connections, history with black operations that investigators need to prosecute Webb and everyone above him. Tommy made the calculation. Your freedom buys more justice than his does. He chose mathematics. Mathematics should not require human sacrifice. But it does, always has. Someone pays for every advance, every revelation, every moment when truth wins over power. Usually the people who pay are the ones who can least afford it. That is the tax on progress. They stood in the parking lot and watched the building and tried to believe that Tommy's sacrifice would matter, that it would change something fundamental, that the cost would purchase something other than one less person in world who chose right over easy. 3 weeks later, General Marcus Webb sat in military tribunal facing charges that would end his career and possibly his freedom. Conspiracy, abuse of authority, conduct unbecoming an officer, violations of treaty obligations, attempted murder of federal personnel. The list continued for 3 pages in legal language. His defense was elegant in its simplicity and internally consistent. I followed orders from above. I executed policy determined by civilian leadership at highest levels. I protected national interests as defined by people with constitutional authority to define them. Every action was authorized through proper channels. Every operation was legal under executive privilege and national security prerogatives. Every decision was made in good faith pursuit of American security interests. The prosecution countered methodically. Authorization does not equal legality under international law. Following orders does not absolve criminal conduct when orders themselves are criminal. National security does not justify treaty violations or attempted murder of whistleblowers exposing illegal programs. You had knowledge. You had discretion. You chose wrong repeatedly. Webb's attorney went further, revealed the network deliberately, named senators who knew about Nightfall development, named contractors who built components, named intelligence officials who provided operational cover, named everyone involved in program that stretched across 3 presidential administrations and involved hundreds of people who all shared culpability for treaty violations. The revelation changed everything strategically, because prosecuting Webb meant prosecuting everyone he named, because pulling one thread unraveled entire tapestry, because system could not punish itself without admitting that system was fundamentally corrupt at multiple levels. So they compromised, found middle ground, convicted Webb of lesser charges that carried punishment but not admission of systemic failure, conduct unbecoming an officer, abuse of authority, violations that carried consequences but not existential threat to institutions, 5 years in federal prison, dishonorable discharge, loss of pension and benefits, permanent criminal record. Enough to claim justice was served, not enough to threaten the structure that enabled him. Elena watched the verdict from gallery, sat next to Vance, both wearing expressions that said we won, but winning feels like losing when examined closely. 5 years for trying to deploy orbital weapons and kill whistleblowers and murder his own operatives when they refused. 5 years. It is more than most get honestly. Most walk away with reprimand or early retirement. At least he faces actual prison time. And the senators, the contractors, the network he exposed. Congressional investigation, hearings, strongly worded reports, no charges filed, no punishment delivered. They will claim ignorance, claim they relied on expert advice, claim they acted in good faith based on intelligence provided by subordinates, the dance that powerful people do when caught. So Webb pays some price, Kessler pays full price, everyone else walks away free. Welcome to justice, where outcomes correlate with power more than evidence. They left the courtroom, walked into sunlight that felt wrong after weeks of testimony and revelation, and the slow understanding that exposure did not guarantee accountability. That truth did not guarantee consequences. That sometimes you burned everything down and system rebuilt itself exactly the same. Hale met them outside. It is over. The trial is over. The system continues unchanged. What do we do now with that knowledge? Elena thought about Syria, about 8 years as ghost, about a night in Hangar 7 when everything broke and nothing fixed fundamentally, about Kessler in Leavenworth and Webb with 5 years a network that would operate until someone else stopped next iteration. We do what ghosts do. We watch. We wait. We act when next person tries what Webb tried. We become institutional memory that prevents amnesia. We make sure someone remembers what happened and why it mattered. For how long? Until there are no more Webbs, or until we are too old to fight, whichever comes first. 3 months later, Elena and Hale stood on ridge in Montana looking at valley where cabin sat isolated and seemingly perfect. The kind of place that promised peace if you believed peace was possible for people who had seen too much and done too much and carried too much. This is the place, Hale asking for confirmation. This is it, 40 acres, no neighbors within 5 miles, no surveillance, no oversight, no system watching to see if we comply with expectations. Sounds like paradise for paranoid people. We earned our paranoia honestly. They walked down to cabin. Inside was sparse, functional, bed, table, chairs, wood stove, the necessities of existence without luxuries that required infrastructure and infrastructure required trust they no longer had. Hale set down his bag, looked around, saw future that was just present extended indefinitely, saw absence of missions and orders and purposes larger than survival. What do we do here when we are not watching for next web? We remember, we process, we figure out who we are when we are not weapons or ghosts or tools. We try to be human again if that is still possible. I do not know if I remember how to be human. Neither do I, we learn together. They settled in, built routines, morning coffee, evening walks, nights talking about everything except what they had done and could not undo, creating space between past and future where present could exist without ghosts. 2 weeks into this new attempt at normalcy, satellite phone rang, encrypted, the kind that only 3 people had number to. Elena answered. Yes. Voice came through, distorted for security, not her old handler, someone new. Miss Reeves, this is Senator Hawkins. We need to talk. About situation that requires discretion. About weapons program that is proceeding without proper oversight. About need for people who understand how to stop things that should not exist. About whether you are interested in making sure Webb was not unique. Elena looked at Hale, saw him listening, saw him nod slightly, saw recognition that retirement lasted until it did not, that ghosts who stopped haunting lost their purpose, that peace was temporary and duty was permanent. We are listening. Good, I have file, classified, disturbing. It involves orbital platforms that sound familiar and authorization chains that look like déjà vu, different names, same problems, interested. What is mission? Same as before, investigate, confirm, expose if necessary, protect whistleblowers, stop programs that violate laws we claim to uphold, the work that official channels cannot do because official channels are compromised. And compensation. Same as before, you do not exist officially. Your actions are deniable. Your success is anonymous. Your failure is permanent. But you serve something that matters more than any individual career or comfort. You serve idea that America means something beyond power, that treaties exist for reason, that some lines should not be crossed regardless of what crossing them accomplishes. Elena thought about Kessler, about sacrifice, about cost that buying better outcomes required, about whether she had more to give or whether she had given everything already. She looked at Hale, saw same question, saw same calculation, saw same answer forming. We need guarantees, protection for anyone who helps us, immunity for actions taken in good faith, resources to actually accomplish mission instead of being burned assets. You will have them, within reason, within constraints of deniability. That is not an answer. It is only answer I can give. You want absolute guarantees, join different line of work. This line has risks. You know that. You do it anyway because someone has to. Elena almost laughed, because that was the trap, the hook that caught idealists and turned them into lifetime operatives. Someone has to. And if you were capable, if you understood stakes, if you had already paid enough costs that few more seemed manageable, then that someone became you. We need to think about it. You have 48 hours. After that, I find someone else, someone with less experience and more desperation, someone who will say yes without conditions because they need purpose more than protection. Your choice. The call ended. Elena set down phone, looked at cabin, at peace they had started building, at normalcy that was almost within reach if they just let it arrive. What do you think? Hale asked. I think we just built this place, put down roots, started healing. Walking away from that to chase another Webb seems stupid. But Webb was not unique. Senator was right. If we do not stop it, someone else will have to, someone without experience, someone who will die trying. That someone is not our responsibility. No, but letting more nightfall programs deploy, because we chose comfort over duty, is our responsibility. We could say no, live here, be done. We earned that option. We did, but earning something and claiming it are different choices. They stood in cabin and felt weight of question. Continue fighting or claim peace. Serve mission or serve self. Be people who stop threats or be people who retired and let others face them. What did Kessler say? Hale asking. About his kids, about legacy. He said they would understand someday that he chose right even when right was hard. You think we should accept? I think we already decided. We are just pretending we have choice because choice makes it feel less like obligation. Hale nodded slowly. 48 hours to decide, but we both know what we decide. We do. Then we spend 48 hours enjoying peace before we walk away from it. They did, spent 2 days living the life they could have had, cooking meals, reading books, walking trails, pretending that purpose could be satisfied by existence and existence was enough. It was not enough. It never would be. On 48th hour, Elena called Senator Hawkins. We accept, send the files. Thank you. The country owes you debt it can never acknowledge. The country owes Tommy Kessler. It owes everyone who paid price while institutions protected themselves. We are just trying to make sure price buys something. It will, I promise. Promises are words. Results are evidence. We will see which you deliver. The files arrived by courier. Encrypted drive. 700 pages. Schematics. Budgets. Authorization chains. Everything needed to understand next nightfall and who was building it and why it needed stopping. Elena and Hale read through night, made notes, identified targets, planned approach, fell back into patterns that felt like coming home even when home was last place they wanted to be. This one is worse than Webb's program, Hale observed. More advanced, faster deployment timeline, broader authorization. Then we have less time. We move fast or we fail. We could fail anyway, could die, could end up like Tommy or worse. Could, but we move anyway, because someone has to and we know how. They packed, left cabin, drove toward next mission that would not be last mission because missions never ended. They just paused between crisis points when people with power thought they could break rules without consequences. 3 weeks into new investigation, Elena received word. Encrypted message. Kessler was dead, found in his cell, apparent suicide, hanging. No witnesses. No evidence of foul play beyond impossibility of man who survived 20 years of combat and sacrificed everything for principle suddenly giving up. She read message twice, felt something cold and final settle, knew without proof that this was not suicide, was cleanup, was Webb's network demonstrating that testimony came with permanent consequences. She called Hale, Tommy is dead. Silence then, how? Official story is suicide. Real story is assassination. They killed him to send message, to show what happens when you testify. We need to respond, need to make them understand that killing Tommy means we escalate. We respond by finishing what he started, by exposing network he died to damage, by making his sacrifice count for something other than fear. That is not enough. It has to be, because revenge is what they want, gives them excuse to eliminate us. We stay focused, stay mission-oriented. We win by doing work instead of satisfying thing. Hale did not respond verbally, agreed silently, because Elena was right and right was harder than satisfying. They continued investigation, worked through grief, used anger as fuel instead of guidance, did what professionals did when emotions threatened judgment, compartmentalized, focused, executed. 2 months later, they exposed second program, leaked files to same journalists, triggered same congressional hearings, caused same outrage followed by same compromise where someone junior faced consequences and systems remained intact. It was not enough, it would never be enough, but it was something. And something was better than silence. 1 year after Hangar 7, Elena sat in congressional hearing room and testified about Webb's network, named names, provided evidence, watched senators who knew everything act surprised, watched staffers take notes they would lose, watched machinery of official response generate activity without change. Vance sat beside her, public figure now, whistleblower hero, face of resistance against military overreach, living proof that standing up mattered even when systems tried to bury you. "Do you think this matters?" Vance whispered. "All this testimony, all this evidence, all these hearings." "It matters to next person deciding whether to blow whistle. Matters because they see you survived. Matters because fear is slightly less than it was. That is small victory. Small victories compound, enough of them and math shifts, not in our lifetime maybe, but eventually." The hearing concluded. Chairman thanked them for service, promised action, delivered statements that would be forgotten by next news cycle. Elena and Vance walked out together, into sunlight, into world that continued regardless of revelations. "What now?" Vance asked. "You continue being visible, being voice, being reminder that whistleblowers are patriots, not traitors. I continue being invisible, being weapon, being ghost that stops next web." You could stop, could retire, could live life you keep building in Montana. I could, but every time I try, someone like Hawkins calls with another file and another program and another proof that work never ends. So I answer, because someone has to. That trap will kill you eventually. Probably, but dying from doing right thing is better than dying from doing nothing. Tommy taught me that. I intend to honor lesson. They separated. Vance to media appearances and speaking circuits. Elena to shadows where ghosts operated and systems pretended they did not exist. 5 years after Hangar 7, Elena Reeves and Daniel Hale stood on same Montana ridge looking at same cabin. Older now. More scars. More missions. More exposure of programs that got replaced by identical programs with different names. "How many?" Hale asked. "How many what? How many operations have we run? How many programs have we stopped? How many webs have we exposed?" 7, if you count small ones. 3 major, all resulting in convictions, all resulting in imprisoned officials and reformed oversight and promises of accountability. And yet here we are, planning number 8. Because systems are immortal and people are temporary, we stop one web, another rises. We expose one program, another launches. We are not winning. We are just preventing loss from being worse. That is depressing. That is reality. You want inspiration, talk to Vance. She still believes exposure creates change. I believe exposure slows decay. Different philosophies, same work. They stood in silence, watched sunset paint valley, felt weight of years and missions and costs accumulating. Tommy would tell us to stop, to claim peace, to let someone else carry load. Tommy would tell us that someone else will die carrying it. That experience matters, that we keep going because we can and they cannot. Tommy is dead because he kept going. Tommy is dead because he stood up. That is different. He knew risk, chose it anyway. We honor that by continuing, by making sure his death counted. How do we know when to stop? Elena thought about question, about answer that had no good version, about truth that saying it aloud made unavoidable. We stop when we are dead or obsolete, whichever comes first. Until then we work. That is terrible plan. It is only plan we have. The satellite phone rang. They both looked at it, knew before answering that this was next mission, next file, next program that needed stopping before it deployed and killed people or violated treaties or pushed humanity closer to wars that technology made possible and ethics made inexcusable. Elena answered, yes. Senator Hawkins, we need you, both of you, something big, bigger than nightfall, bigger than anything we have seen. I am sending files, read them, call me back, make this your priority. Everything is our priority. We do not have luxury of choosing. This one is different. This one could end everything if we do not stop it. They are always different, always world-ending, always most important. We will read files, we will call you back, we will probably say yes, because that is what we do. Thank you. Do not thank us. Thank Tommy Kessler. Thank everyone who paid price so we could keep working. Thank people who sacrificed so systems could improve incrementally. We are just people still standing. The call ended. The files arrived. Elena and Hale read them, saw scope, saw danger, saw confirmation that work never ended because human ambition never ended, and ambition without ethics created threats that people like them existed to counter. Big, Hale noted, very big. Yes. Could actually end everything. Yes. We need help, Bishop Chen, Ramirez, maybe others. Agreed, make calls. They made calls. Teams assembled. Plans formed. Machinery of unofficial response mobilized toward next threat that official channels could not address because official channels were compromised or incompetent or too slow to matter. The work continued. The missions accumulated. The costs compounded. But somewhere, young lieutenant decided not to follow illegal orders because she remembered story of Elena Reeves who stopped orbital weapons. Somewhere, contractor refused to build treaty-violating systems because he remembered story of Sarah Vance who blew whistle. Somewhere, soldier chose conscience over career because he remembered story of Thomas Kessler who sacrificed everything so his team could walk free. The victories were small, the costs were large, the math never balanced. But work continued anyway, because someone had to do it, because alternative was worse, because ghosts who stopped haunting lost their purpose and purpose was only thing that made costs bearable. Elena Reeves had died in Syria 8 years ago. The paperwork said so. The memorial said so. The official record said so. But she kept working, kept fighting, kept stopping programs that powerful people built and ethical people opposed. She would work until she could not, would fight until she fell, would stop what could be stopped and accept what could not. That was price. That was duty. That was choice made again every morning when phone rang and another file arrived, and another mission needed someone who knew how to operate in shadows while aiming for light. The cabin in Montana sat empty most days, waiting for retirements that never came, waiting for peace that remained theoretical, waiting for day when Elena and Hale would return and stay and finally claim life they kept building and kept leaving. Maybe that day would come, maybe it would not. But until it did, they had work to do, programs to stop, whistleblowers to protect, systems to remind that accountability existed even when enforcement was inconsistent. The sun set on Montana, rose somewhere else, marked another day in long struggle between power and principle, between what was legal and what was right, between people who built weapons and people who stopped them from being used. Elena and Hale walked into that struggle, again, together. The way ghosts always did, the way soldiers always had. Until the last order was given, and last shot was fired, and last ghost finally rested. But not today. Today they walked. That was enough. It had to be. This one hit different while I was researching it. The hardest part wasn't the firefight or the countdown. It was Kessler choosing prison so his team could walk free. That's the kind of leadership they don't teach in manuals. I want to ask you something. If you were in Elena's position, would you have followed orders to stand down? Or broken cover to save those 43 people, knowing it could cost everything you built over 8 years? And here's what keeps me up at night. How many real operations like this happen that we'll never hear about? Drop your thoughts below. If you served, I especially want to hear your take on that impossible choice between orders and conscience. And if this story resonated with you, there are more like it on the channel. Different missions, same questions about what we owe each other when systems fail. Hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. These stories need to be told.